our November. Well, I'll start over again, Jared. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our monthly Marine Fish Advisory Commission, this being November 2024. I'm calling this meeting to order. I have no introductions nor announcements, so I guess we can move right into a roll call. Jared?
Yes. Bill Amaru.
Here.
Bill Doyle.
Here.
Chris McGuire.
Here.
Leo Bogdan.
Here.
Shelley Edmondson.
Here.
Tim Brady.
Tim Brady here.
Ray Kane.
Here.
Suki Sawyer. All right, Suki is not in attendance tonight. Moving on, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to the review of the November 2024 business meeting agenda. Has anybody need for change in the agenda?
Not seeing any hands raised.
Therefore, we don't have to vote on this. We just move along.
Correct.
Review and approval of the October 2024 draft business meeting minutes. Has anybody got edits? Hopefully everybody read the minutes. Has anybody edits? And if not, I need a motion.
I'll move that. Second.
Who's that, Bill?
Yeah, that's Bill Amaru. Yes,
And
Bill.
Bill Doyle moved it and Bill Amaru seconded. All those in favor?
Well, roll call vote on all actions.
Roll call vote.
Bill Amaru.
Aye.
Bill Doyle.
Yes.
Chris McGuire.
Yes.
Leo Bogdan.
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson.
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you all. Moving on, just as Bill Amaru said earlier, it's a beautiful day down here on Cape Cod. Maybe we'll have to rethink these in-person meetings for next year. Jared, and sneak November in. Usually November's a decent month if you can find a location. That way we'll only be having Zoom meetings December, January, February, and March. So I know there's still a number of commission members who like to meet in person.
Roger that.
Okay, and I'll turn this over to law enforcement. Who's on today? Lieutenant Bass?
We have Lieutenant Bass and Captain Chapin on today.
Okay, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I can, although I should defer to Captain Chapin. Did you have anything you wanted to say, or?
Good morning, everybody. The only thing, Matt, I just wanted to bring up James Cullen's recent case out of Mount Hope Bay with mantis shrimp. Although mantis shrimp's unregulated, it's we've been getting reports over the years of Rhode Island draggers crossing the line of Mount Hope Bay into Massachusetts waters at night, and we've been looking for a long time. And just last week, James was able to get there and basically had found them all with a lot of assistance from the Rhode Island Police, Rhode Island Environmental Police. So it's been a good case, and finally was able to identify them and catch them in the act. So that's been a good thing. Otherwise, and Matt, I'll defer back to you too if you have anything else to add. It's hunting season, so a lot of people are off the boats and checking hunters for the next month or so. But that's all I've got. Again, thanks for everybody on the last week's meeting for the law enforcement focus group meeting. I think a lot of things were well done there and appreciate it. And that's all I've got. Does anybody have anything for me?
Captain Chapin, was that a violation of both fishing without a mass permit and fishing at night?
Yes, Jared. So they have no permits at all. And
they were night
also
fishing
at
as
night.
well?
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
That did result, I believe, in a total trip seizure.
Yep.
So I have a question, Captain. It's Ray Kane here. So were those out-of-state boats or state boats?
Well, they're state registered out of Massachusetts state. They're state registered in Rhode Island, state draggers.
So what's the process then?
As far as what do you mean for process?
Well, do they get taken to court?
Yeah, yeah. So with Rhode Island's assistance, we've got we've got them. We've got proof of them in the Mass Waters. He aborted the boats when they went back to Rhode Island, and so James is. And again, this investigation's brand new. Just a few days ago. So I'm sorry. It was. Oh, it sounded like somebody else was talking. So yeah, the process basically is James working with Rhode Island and Rhode Island's authorities on getting it through.
Yeah, well, all the violations occurred in Massachusetts, so that makes it easy.
Right.
And I think it was also sold to a mass dealer, which for the libel and this trip seizure also kind of simplifies things as well. But yeah, he did. Lieutenant Cullen did, get underway with the Rhode Island EPOs to board and conduct that investigation. But all in all, it did all occur in Massachusetts. So.
Yeah.
So Lieutenant Bass, I have a further question, if you don't mind. You mentioned
Absolutely.
the buyer in Massachusetts. What's the outcome with the buyer?
Well, that would probably be part of the investigation. If they didn't know anything was, they probably didn't know where the catch was being harvested, or if the person had the proper permit. So I'd have to check in with
Thank you.
Lieutenant Cullen.
Questions for Lieutenant Bass or the captain?
Yes, Bill Doyle. What was the species?
Mantis shrimp, which is unregulated in Mass, but it's more of a permitting and night fishing violation in Mass waters.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Further questions?
Khalil.
Leo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious, when the vessel was boarded, were they surprised? Were they embarrassed? Did they say, mea culpa, we didn't know? What was their reaction?
Right now, it's hard to kind of because the investigation is still ongoing. They were, I know that there was recognition, acknowledgement. I can pretty much state that. But otherwise, no, it was, I mean, this is something that I think this has been going on for quite a while. It's just a matter of us being there at the right place, right time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Lieutenant Bass, have you got other subject matter to discuss?
Well, I was gonna follow up Captain Chapin that, yeah, we are seeing that change of season, and we're seeing, I guess, a lot of the same faces in the woods due to the hunting season. We still have a pretty nice stock of tautog around that is attracting some attention, and a lot of short fish. The wreck lobster season did end, so we've already started looking for some of that that leftover gear to get it removed preemptively. As mentioned, that alley focus group, well attended, and I think very productive. If you had time to read that, the summary, and I see it as an agenda item, I'm sure there'll be some questions there. I don't think we have any new hires in the pipe right now, but we did make several promotions. 2 go to the coastal boats under myself, and 1 in Gloucester. And the newest officer was just assigned. She's going to be in the Boston area, and I have nothing further.
Questions for Lieutenant Bass?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
I have one for you, Lieutenant Bass. So when does the state usually perform new hires? Let me put it that way, or ask that question.
I think Captain Chapin would be better for that.
Yeah, I can probably help with that. So we just hired last year 15 new people, which is a huge. We haven't, and I've been on the force for 15 years, and I've never seen that many people. But again, it's not period. There is no real kind of system of hiring. We tried a few years ago to get an earmark in the bill to hire maybe 3 a year, just to kind of go against the outflow of resignations or retirements. So we don't really have a set pace of how we hire. Again, we just try and hire as quick as we can when we're able to. So this is typically controlled by the EEA, not us, on the funding side. So again, don't really have any kind of answer as far as the next time we're going to hire. We're not sure right now. Again, typically going into this next year, we'll try to find funding for new hires, just so we can keep the momentum of the last 15. So that was a huge plus, but we want to maintain that momentum so we don't drop back down into the 90s and 80s again.
So, if I may continue, what is our number at today with the 15 new hires?
105. So we have 105 law enforcement officers. And that includes command staff and the union folks.
So I thought it was just a few years ago we were at 135.
No, that would be a long time ago. Again, I've been here since 2010, and I've also been, why I can probably answer this is I've been on the firearms team the whole time, and we're always looking at the numbers. So I'm always looking at the rosters, and over the last, I'd say 15 years, we've kind of hovered in the 90s. We went down to the high 80s, but pretty much we've been around 95, I would say, as the average over the last 10 to 15 years. I know there was much more when they did the merger long time ago, when they merged the two agencies to become the environmental police. That's when it came up to, I think, 135 or higher, but not in a long time.
Yeah, that's the number I remember.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do what we can. The commission submits a letter every year to the governor's office.
Great.
But you
Really
would
appreciate any help.
Captain, you would like to see the force expanded, right? I mean, that's been the issue for all these years. We get together and DMF and the commission, and DMF, makes proposals on regulations, but then we don't have enough boots on the ground for enforcement. And that's.
Yeah, that's always a challenge in government agencies, never have enough people. But again, there is a reasonable number, and we would like to see that raised a bit. Again, because just like you said, we have many, many hats, and it's hard to, follow through long-term investigations. The mantis shrimp was typical. We've been looking at that. Geez, when I was down in the South Coastal region, that was probably 7 or 8 years ago. We knew of this going on, but it's just a matter of number of people being able to focus on particular investigations. It's just hard to do that. So absolutely, if we can get more bodies, we definitely will, and appreciate any support you guys have.
Thank you. Any other questions for law enforcement?
Just so you know, I have to jump at 10 o'clock for another meeting. So if you have anything for me that can't be held but for Matt, just let me know beforehand. But I otherwise appreciate it.
Thank you, Captain.
Not seeing any other comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. I'll turn the floor over to Commissioner Tom O'Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. Got some good news, progress to report that we've been working on for quite a while, and it's now starting to move along. So one thing I want to bring up is we've made really good progress on the derelict ghost gear bill sponsored by Senator Tarr and Representative Lenatra, and it was filed last February. And our work at the department, our legislative team, Assistant Commissioner Jen Ryan and Legislative Director Noah McClannon, along with the DMF team, have worked pretty hard to really build support in the legislature. We got it attached to the Economic Development Bill, and we received strong legislative support, and it's made it. Now the whole Economic Development Bill has made it to the governor's desk. So this is really good. This is something I know that DMF had worked on even prior to my coming on board as commissioner, but we got in and made this a priority, and it's great to see it get this far. This is a great step for Massachusetts to take to reduce the amount of abandoned gear in the ocean, as well as on beaches and the shore. And I think it's helpful, general getting any of this gear out of the water, particularly when we're concerned about entanglements and other impacts to fisheries. So the other issue, as you know, is abandoned gear and boat strikes are also a problem, in safety. And we just think this is a great, great progress. So DMF will probably have to promulgate regulations once this goes into statute. But, you know, I can let Dan and others speak more to it, but great job by DMF and the DFP team on that one. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that we have been working also on, you know, food security, and that's a big part of our strategic plan for our whole department and divisions. And so we've been working on, you know, a Share the Catch program. And part of building towards that effort is we got an earmark for a feasibility study. So DMF and Story Reed will be working on putting out an RFR to have a feasibility study. That'll assess options, barriers, and opportunities to get local underutilized Massachusetts seafood into food pantries while supporting prices paid to local commercial fishers. It will include a study of existing models of seafood and food pantries, supply chain issues, costs, and logistical issues. And it will, you know, consider input from food banks, commercial fishers, seafood dealers, and others. So we're hoping that the lessons learned from this will be used to fund a pilot program. And we, you know, again, want to thank Senator Tarr and Representative Ferrante for helping support that. I know that Shelley Edmondson on the commission has experience with this, so we're certainly looking to get Shelley's expertise and perspectives on that. The other thing that's progress is DMF and Office of Fishing and Boating Access have made great progress in the construction of the Salem Willows Fishing Pier in Salem, and we're hoping to have an event for that, I think December 2nd, and the Lieutenant Governor is likely, we believe, to attend. I know she was a champion of this project from the beginning, but it would be a grand opening celebration and with the city of Salem, who partnered with us to rebuild the historic pier at Salem Willows Park. So it was supported, as you know, by $2 million raised from the sale of recreational saltwater fishing permits and additional funds from the city of Salem and Seaport Economic Council. So we're really excited to have a world-class pier that'll provide, you know, really important public access for thousands of visitors. And, you know, it's also, you know, within an environmental justice community as well. That's real positive and goes to show what our DMF team is doing to provide public access. And then the last thing I'll just mention is that the department has hired CBI, the Consensus Building Institute, to help Director McKiernan and our director CZM and the department stand up the Commercial Fisheries Commission. And what that really means is that we're hoping to have them support facilitation of meetings, but really right now we're just trying to, you know, get a sense of the membership, that commission and the interests of that, and really developing a focus and an agenda. And Dan can speak more to that as well. But just wanted to give you a heads up on that because that's the commission we would like to stand up sometime in next year. I'll also mention I think we have our Deputy Commissioner Safathia Ramayathekan on the call, and she's been really helpful in a number of things and working with us and liaisoning with the commercial fisheries community, and especially with the Share the Catch program, because I know that she's done a lot to help with that. So just want to recognize Safathia. So with that, that's my report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Shea. Questions for the commissioner?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner O'Shea, I'm going to presume that commission members are welcome to this dedication on December 2nd in Salem.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you there.
So somebody will be sending a notice to the commission members on the date.
Yes, I'll make sure we send you that. Jared, do you want to maybe work with Eileen and Bob Greco to send that out?
Not a problem, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So there's no further questions for the commissioner. I'll move this along to Director Dan McKiernan. Dan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ray. Good morning, everyone. It's been only 3 weeks since our last meeting, and while there are no action items today, we do have some really informative program and management updates. I'll follow up on a couple of Tom's points. This Commercial Fisheries Commission is an interesting one. It was enacted by the legislature 2 years ago, I think primarily to deal with issues on behalf of the constituent organizations around the fishing organizations, dealing with the impacts of offshore wind. And that's certainly a part of it. And the language also talks about, other issues like sustainability. The key for me, and I've been working with Tom and CBI, is to find the niche for this group that doesn't step on this group, the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission, nor does it bump into the offshore wind fisheries working group that is convened every couple of months. So we're going to, part of this task that CBI is working on is to work with the members, and the members include a whole bunch of organizations that were identified by the legislature in the statute. So I know the Commercial Fishermen's Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance is on it. MLA is on it. There's just a whole bunch of organizations. And so I will be very careful to, kind of create not only guardrails so that we can make sure that this group's mission is still distinct and clear, but also that it has some usefulness. And I'm thinking it will. We might delve into things like working waterfront issues, things that we might be able to get other agencies to help us with, like CVM, and even the Seaport Economic Council, areas that this commission doesn't usually delve into. So that's a work in progress, but I just want the commission to know that that's what's on my mind, is the sensitivity about making sure that this new group has a niche, and that this niche is distinct from the good work that this commission does. The derelict gear bill, Tom's right. To give credit to staff, I'd also like to put special credit to Glenn for his leadership on this. And we will be reconvening, getting the band back together, so to speak, of this working group that wrote the white. And what's going to happen next is once it passes imminently, we'll come back to this commission with proposed regulations, I think, that we've already drafted, that were part of an early version of the report. And it will clarify, what is what is fishing gear debris, what is fishing gear that's intact. Also, maybe create some protocols for how to deal with gear that's taken off the shoreline and off the seafloor, because what it does is it makes any gear that's been abandoned in a closed area basically removable by the agency. Then it also reduces the need for law enforcement to be always present when something like that occurs. So that's a work in progress, but it's a big deal. It was clearly one of my professional objectives to iron this issue out. I mean, we all know that laws made sense back in the middle of the 20th century when wooden lobster traps would wash ashore. We didn't want them to wind up in people's TV rooms and coffee tables. Stuff that's coming ashore in the modern times is banged up metal, plastic coated metal that really has very little purpose, and you can barely get the owners to come pick it up. And the municipalities are always very frustrated by their inability to remove what we would consider litter, from the shoreline. So one of the key challenges is to discriminate or distinguish between what is litter and what is salvageable gear. We've had a number of interesting meetings in the last 3 weeks that we're going to be reporting on today. The fluke fishery meeting is always a great one. We got some great feedback. The law enforcement focus group was very successful. It's always great to get not only the leadership of law enforcement together, but often invite some of their officers who are on the front line and that firsthand knowledge and reports that came out of that meeting were really, really valuable, and look forward to the report today. Our Shellfish Advisory Panel, which is a legislative created entity at our request, communicates to us, and also, we communicate to them about our shellfish program. The thing about shellfish is, we do deal with shellfish, but not on a regulatory basis as much as some of our other routine fisheries, because of that unique home rule issue. And I've often felt that it doesn't get enough exposure to our users. I mean, you all as a 9-member board, serve as a great set of overseers of all of our great work. And the shellfish program, often kind of, stays under the candles under the basket, so to speak, because so many of those issues are dealt with the municipalities or with FDA or with DPH. So this committee is really valuable to bring the stuff forward. And it's gotten the legislature's attention as well, because they'd like, some of the legislators would like to see us bolster our shellfish program. And it gives us kind of an audience and a stage to describe all the challenges that we have in shellfish. So I'm really pleased with how that's been going. And Wayne Castanway, who is one of our newest employees, he was hired about a year ago, he's done a fabulous job of being the north section leader, and he is he's the person who is now the liaison, is my proxy on that. He's doing a great job. We also had a meeting with just last night, the Gloucester office, to talk about the Newburyport depuration plant. That's a real challenge for DMF, because the facility has not been accepting any clams for a full year because of coastal erosion and the loss of the wells. And we're at a crossroads with the facility relative to whether we can continue the operations there, given the very low throughput. That the amount of clams going through that plant is about 95% off from about 20 to 25 years ago. But it's a challenge, and of course the folks who are dependent on that, want us to continue, but it's really, really challenging given the small amount of clams that goes through the plant. And finally, I mentioned the December 2nd, 10 a.m. Event at Salem Willows. So please come if you're in the neighborhood. There's a second event, and that you can if you're opening your calendar and penciling things in, on Saturday, June 14th, we're working on a DMF public event up at that Cat Cove Marine Lab to kind of expose all of our programs to the general public. And so that's a first ever event, and it's something that Dr. Gary Nelson, who's overseeing the facility now since Mike retired, it's his brainchild, and we're really looking forward to that. It's going to be an all of DMF event, and we'll be working with the department to put that together. But put that on your penciled in calendar. That's all I have today, Chairman Kane. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director. Questions for the Director?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Then we'll move this along with the recent resignation of our Vice Chair. We were forewarned at the last meeting there's going to be an election for the Vice Chair. So, not speaking to anybody about this, I'm going to ask for nominations. Hello? Do I hear any nominations for Vice Chair?
Does not look that way, Mr. Chair. We can postpone this till December.
So we're just going to keep kicking the can, okay? And Dan just referred to a 9-member board. Are we still looking to replace Mike Pierdnock? Have we got names in the silo, or how's that coming?
Do you want to speak to that? Ray, what I can say is it's a governor's appointment.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah.
go ahead.
This is the appointment to replace Mike Peardenach?
That's right.
Yeah, we have a candidate that was on the governor's desk for this week, so we're looking forward to shortly getting that appointment approved and having hopefully the member come on in December. Dan, did you want to say anything else?
No, I guess we'll just wait for the news from the governor's office.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So, Jared, how do we want to move forward with this election for vice chair? I mean, other than postponing it today and moving it to December, what's the workload here? Who should be addressing this?
I mean, the commission needs to make a nomination, decide for themselves who they want to serve as vice chair. And then, vote on that. So, I mean, it's just a matter of someone, putting forth a nomination to vote on and
Yeah,
someone being
Raymond-
willing to take the position.
Raymond, I
So-
recommend you use your powers of persuasion and find one of the 7 remaining members to consider that.
So, Director, you're asking me to
Well, as chairman,
contact individual commission members to see if they're willing to step up as vice chair.
right, certainly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, I have some clarity on that because I knew we had pushed this off to this meeting and I didn't hear anything about names being mentioned or nominations. So, all right, I'll put that on my
Yeah, a little
calendar.
bit of heart
Thank-
twisting. Go for it, Ray.
Yeah, arm twisting. Thank you. I'm not, that's not my job. That's but that being said, okay, I guess we could move along if nobody has anything to say about this election for vice chair. Any comments on this or
Yeah,
thoughts?
Khalil here, Mr. Chair.
Khalil, you're recognized.
I feel that if we don't have a vice chair and for some reason you have to leave the meeting, I would then recommend that the next in line would be Bill Doyle, who happens to be our clerk, to be able to take over the meeting. There has to be someone that's going to preside over the meeting if in fact you are not present.
Right. So are you nominating Bill Doyle today?
No, I'm saying until we find a vice chair, I would think that the line of operating and running the meeting would then fall to the next officer. That would be Bill Doyle.
Right. Thank you, Khalil. All right, we have clarity with that. Well, let's move this along to future public hearing proposals. Menhaden, that was an interesting public hearing we had. Hello?
There it is, Nick. We're going to present.
Yes, I'm just getting the slides already. Please hold on.
Yeah, so just a little bit of an introduction. The meeting was actually held prior to our previous meeting, but we didn't have time to organize all the material to you. But it was a very informative meeting up in our Salem office, and great input from the fleet. I felt that there was a lot of positive feedback we got from the fleet in order to sort of recognizing all the work that we do to control the fishery, to try to make the quota available to multiple users and different scales of harvest. And then the fundamental question gets down to how do you want to tail off toward the end of the season, and that's what Nick will be talking about here. So that's sort of the fundamental question. Who can describe that? But I think we're in a good place with how we're managing the fishery, and I think that a lot of the participants agree with this.
All right. Good morning, commission members and other attendees. So what we have for Menhaden is kind of a 3-part proposal. There's 3 separate issues that I'll cover in a couple of slides. The meeting that we had in mid-October really was helpful. The first issue about the trip limits is something that we went into the meeting thinking that we needed to address, whereas the additional 2 issues were brought forward by the participants at that meeting. So it really was useful to have a scoping meeting prior to our proposal development. So as you know, with our limited entry fishery, we have a series of triggers based on quota use and trip limits that scale down as the quota is used, with the intent of trying to balance, full utilization of the quota as well as a long season of access for some, level of purse seining throughout the season of availability. That was made a little bit more challenging a couple of years ago when purse seines were removed in the fishery management plan from that allowance for a 6,000 pound limit after a state's quota is taken. So 2 years ago, we created the 90% quota use trigger that scaled the trip limit for the limited entry fishery down to 6,000 pounds, essentially trying to build those additional landings that we had seen after the quota was taken kind of into the quota management. We've only had that 90% trigger for the last 2 years. The last 2 years were very different situations, but what we saw this year with the fishery is that leaving 10% of the quota for a 6,000 pound trip limit is really too much based on the current quota, which is overall, over 10 million pounds, and the current amount of effort in the fishery. So we had to do a bit of, maneuvering with quota transfers and other things in order to really access our quota because of that 90% trigger. And the industry members are, interested to either move that trigger up to somewhere in the, 95 to 98% range. So it leaves, a little bit less quota for the 6,000 pound limit, or potentially to remove that 90% trigger altogether, such that the trip limit would stay 25,000 pounds until 100% quota use. The interest in that is to be able to access the episodic event set aside. That's that 1% of the quota that's set aside for the Northeast states. But you can only access it if you use 100% of your quota prior to September 1st. And so while other states are continuing to use that additional quota, there is interest among the fleet to be able to do so as well in Massachusetts. So we're looking at that kind of range of options, still trying to, figure out whether to be, more conservative with including the 6,000 pound limit, or trying to, get through the quota to access the episodic set aside. The risk there, as we've talked about with the industry, is that set aside it's a shared pool of quota. We don't necessarily know that it's going to be available when we use up our quota. And there's a little bit less latent quota in the fishery coast-wide since the reallocations went into effect a couple of years ago. But it does, we have had very good relationships with other states about getting transfers. So, that it's likely that we could continue to do that in some small scale way to keep the fishery going. But that's kind of the range of options there for the trip limits, is to either get rid of that 90% quota use trigger, or bump it up so that there's just less quota set aside for that remaining, small scale part of the fishery. The next issue that was brought forward to us at the scoping meeting, next slide, please, was to look at participation in the fishery. About over a year ago, we adopted an August 1st, 2023 control date for both the limited entry Menhaden endorsement as well as the open access cap purse seine endorsement. There's concern that with other quotas declining for bait fisheries, mackerel and herring, that there will be more interest in the Menhaden fishery. And our whole quota management approach, kind of the profitability of the fishery, works well right now based on the current number of participants. And so we adopted a control date, and industry members are encouraging us to apply those control dates at this time. So the control date is a little different for those two types of permits. The Menhaden endorsement, as I said, is already limited entry. So using the control date allows us to remove some of those limited, those issued permits based on on some landing activity. So, the number of permits was 51 in 2024, and we looked at a couple of different criteria, looking at landings over the last 10 years or the last 5 years, landing either 1 pound or making one 6,000 pound tripment, and seeing how much the permits get scaled down. Using that's what that first table is there. So based on different activity criteria, the use of the control date may remove as many, could bring us down to 13 permits based on what we looked at here. The cap per seine endorsement is an open access permit, and the way the control date for that one was written is that it only allows us to not issue new permits after or no, to not renew any permits issued after August 1st of 2023. So we would essentially, employ the control date to stop issuing new cap per seine endorsements. And then the proposal also includes changing the wording of that control date language so that we could, similar to the Menhaden endorsement, apply some, landings criteria to further restrict participation in the future if so needed. But it would be a first step for the cap per seine endorsements to stop issuing new permits and not renew any that were first issued after August 1st.
Hey, Nicola, could you
Yes.
explain for the commission what the cap per seine is? I have a feeling that it's a little bit obtuse, so.
Sure. So we have a coastal access permit, which is already a limited access mobile gear permit. The cap per seine endorsement is a mobile gear permit for per seining only. So it's primarily issued to those, it's an open access permit that's been issued to those interested in the per seining for Menhaden. But if you don't have the Menhaden endorsement, you're limited to the 6,000 pound limit. And if you look at the second table here, what you can see is that early on in the Menhaden fishery, we when it started, going 10 years ago, once we had a quota, we were only issuing 6, 5, 8 of them. And then as the availability of Menhaden in the Northeast really grew, the permit issuance of these open access permits has, grew to as much as 79 in 2023. It seems like it's kind of plateaued in the last couple of years, but there's, a lot of permits that are not being used, and it's an open access permit. So this has raised concern among the current industry members that there, will be interest to enter this fishery from, from other states or within our own state.
Thank you.
And then the last part of the proposal is there was interest among some industry members at the scoping meeting to establish a allowance for a vessel, 2 vessels participating in the fishery, the ability to remove catch from the other vessel's net, such as if, the set is just a lot larger than the one vessel is allowed to take with the trip limit, rather than discarding those fish, potentially into nearshore areas to allow another vessel that is, similarly authorized and rigged to fish in the fishery, to bridle fish from that vessel's net. Maine has a program that authorizes this. It functions as a kind of a pilot program where 2 vessels can do this. Prior to the start of the season, you designate, a particular vessel that you're going to have this partnership with. Importantly, both of the vessels in Maine and what we're proposing to do here or consider here is that both of the vessels would have to be, active Menhaden participants that have the ability to set the net themselves to land the same level of fish. But in this instance, they would just be allowed to kind of help out the other vessel and themselves by taking the fish that have already been caught rather than set another seine. So this could result in, a little bit less gear in the water, which is often appreciated from a user conflict view. But we do have concern about, inviting new effort. So it would be important that this pilot program does, have some limitations as to, which 2 vessels could participate in this type of program. So the proposal is to do this through a pilot program initially, see how it works, and then potentially consider, a regulatory change in the future to allow this. Under the current rules, if any other second vessel is going to help out, the fishing vessel, that other vessel would be considered a carrier vessel, and the limit for the 2 vessels combined is one single trip limit. So this would allow 2 vessels each to take a trip limit from from one of the vessels set. But this would start out as a pilot program. So that's what the third proposal is. And I am happy to take any questions about any of those Menhaden proposals.
Thank you, Nicola, for your presentation. Questions for Nicola? Khalil, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nicola, complicated but important information. How many vessels, you may have said it, and I apologize if you did say it and I missed it. How many vessels or boats right now are operating?
So there's
in this
about,
fishery?
there's, depending on the year, there's, 6 to 10, I would say, that operate at the levels above 6,000 pounds. And then another handful that operate, in the open access fishery. But there are a lot more permits issued than are active.
Okay, and the vessels that are operating in this fishery, have they given you kind of any input, how they feel about this?
Yes, yeah. So this particular part of the proposal, as well as applying the control dates, were both requested at the scoping meeting that we had in Gloucester in mid-October.
Okay, I think I remember that. Thank you, Nicola.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Questions for Nicola?
Not seeing any other hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Nicola, can you go back to slide 1, please? So we're talking 6 to 10 vessels. So what's the age of this fleet, the ownership? My thoughts are about owners retiring out. Would they, in fact, sell their permit as they do in the lobster industry? How will that work in the future?
If the Menhaden endorsement became, so Menhaden endorsements are transferable when active 4 out of 5 years. If we use the control date, it would just reduce the number of Menhaden endorsements that are issued. So they'd still be transferable, if active.
Okay, I understand that. My only thought is I would like, if they are transferable, I would rather they go to an individual as opposed to, well, I'm not going to mention names, but, company boats, big operators. I'd rather it go to the individual so we can maintain a fishery for individuals as opposed to LLCs. That's all. It's just a thought.
Well,
I
Ray,
want to keep the hobby.
It is owner operator, the Menhaden endorsement.
It is. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
and Ray, a lot of commercial fishing businesses, even those that are owner operator, they have accountants that recommend that their business be put to an LLC for liability reasons. It doesn't necessarily make them a corporation, but not in the way that you're describing. So as Nicholas said, because it is an owner operator requirement, the permit holder is going to be on the boat.
Right, okay, good. I just want to make sure there's a future for owner operators. That's all I was really going with my point. I understand a lot of people are incorporated, but I would like to find or maintain a way of fishers or harvesters to come into the business as an owner operator, you know, if they have the financial resources to do it. But all right, thank you. Any other questions for Nicola?
Not seeing any hands.
I guess we can either take a biological break for 10 minutes or we can move on. What's the privy? How does everybody feel? You want to take a biological break?
That
before
sounds
we-
fine. That sounds fine to me.
Sounds
10
good,
minutes.
Ray.
10 minutes? Jared, 10
10
minutes?
minutes.
Thank
With
you.
that, 10:02?
That's 10:02.
Thank you,
Ten
Jared.
oh two. See you then. Well, figuratively.
Recording good? You're good, Mr. Chair.
Well, good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to reconvene this meeting. So I guess we're going to move on to summer flounder quota management rules. And I don't,
Gonna take this one.
thank you.
Okay, Dan, you don't have any opening remarks?
No, go for it, Jared.
All right. So back on November 4th, we had our annual industry scoping meeting with the summer flounder fishery at our New Bedford office to discuss mostly the management of the period 2 summertime fishery, but the management of the summer flounder fishery in general. The focus of the discussion that evening was on, several things. Performance this year, concerns about effort moving forward, particularly with reduced cod quota, the trip limits and trip limit triggers and how this year resulted in a late August closure, interest in maintaining the fishery into September, particularly among draggers who want to stay in the sounds and fish for horseshoe crabs to have some amount of bycatch of summer flounder, and the pilot program, the multi-day pilot program during the summer, which allows draggers to take one limited day but not come in and land each day to hold fish over from day 1 to land on day 2 with day 2's limit. And some concerns that that program has evolved beyond its original intent and has, is being abused or misused in some ways. And this meeting really helped us, kind of frame some proposals for this coming year. For public hearing and both for potential in-season adjustment for the period 1 wintertime fishery. So what we've discussed doing is for a in-season adjustment for 2025 to propose, following this meeting for an action at the December meeting by the commission to reduce that trip limit from 5,000 pounds to 2,000 pounds, and to consider potentially not authorizing the multi-state program during that winter period. At present, we allow vessels who are permitted in a number of states to land summer flounder to come into Massachusetts, offload their Massachusetts limit of summer flounder, and then continue on to whatever other states they're permitted in to offload that state's limit, so they can exceed our state limit when offloading, provided they don't offload more than that state limit. And we've done this the past few years with the Northeast states, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York. But there's a lot of lack of we have more permit holders from other states than our state has permit holders who can land elsewhere. So there's a lack of reciprocity there that we potentially want to reconsider the program on. And additionally, then we'd go out to public hearing with a proposal for 2026 to make a commensurate adjustment to the trip limit. So whatever we land on for 2025, consider adopting for 2026 and beyond. And also consider reducing the seasonal allocation granted to the period one fishery from 30% to as low as 15%. And the thinking here is the fish are more valuable during the summertime period on an X vessel price. So that would reallocate some fish inshore to a period where more of our permit holders can access it and the fish is more valuable. Then for period two, for 2025, we'd go out to public hearing to reduce the trip limit by about 15% from 600 pounds to 500 pounds for net fishermen and 400 pounds to 325 pounds for hook fishermen. That maintains the hook trip limit at approximately 2/3 of the net trip limit, which it has historically been. And that will slow the take of fish to start the season, but still maintain a trip limit that allows the fishery to be profitable in the early season when the price is best. And then we can reduce the trip limit as the season goes on in response to quota availability, with the goal of keeping this fishery open into the early fall so that there can be hook fishing, particularly as the fish move east onto Nantucket shoals, and that draggers can continue to maintain a bycatch of this when targeting other species like horseshoe crabs. So there's two proposals to kind of slow the consumption of this quota as the season goes on. The first is to amend the existing trip limit trigger mechanism to move the use by date back from August 1 to August 15th. So as if there's 75% of the quota is taken before August 15th, then the trip limit is reduced to 400 pounds for nets and 250 pounds for hooks. Had this been the case last year, we would have hit this trigger. I believe we hit it around August 3rd, but since the use by date in the regs this past year was August 1, we weren't able to hit that trigger, and we ended up closing the fishery in late August rather than early September. And on the hook proposal, you'll see that it actually increases the trip limit from 250 pounds from 200 pounds to 250 pounds, and that corrects an error in the regulation from last year, whereby it brings the hook trip limit back up to 2/3 the dragger trip limit, whereas it's historically been. And then the second proposal, which really came out of the industry meeting, was to set aside the last 10% of the quota for a bycatch allowance during should the fishery hit that 90% trigger for before September 1. So that would be if 90% of the quota is taken on or before September 1, then the trip limit goes to 200 pounds for all gear types. That will maintain a directed hook fishery during the early fall and also provide draggers with a bycatch opportunity when targeting other species like horseshoe crabs. At this time, we're not proposing any changes to the period to fall fishery. The thinking there is that whatever quota remains, should there be any quota that remains, we'd want the fishery to access that. So they'd still have a 5,000 pound trip limit if more than 10% of the quota remains, or 800 pounds if less than 10% of the quota remains on October 1 when that period started. The memo contains a bunch of additional rationale as to how we landed on these and some of the discussion at the industry meeting. So I'd be happy to take comments on the proposal or any of the discussion in the memo regarding the rationale or the discussion at the industry meeting. So Bill, Amaru, I see you have your hands up.
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this is a very big improvement over where we were a year ago. I guess it should fall under the category of learn from your mistakes, and I think we have. I don't think anybody, including me, expected the rapid catch rate that we experienced this past summer to occur the way it did, and to be stuck out in left field, at least those of us who were waiting for the fish to arrive in our grounds in the middle of August, and then with nothing to be able to catch it as the season progressed. This proposal should alleviate most of those conditions from occurring again, and it takes into consideration the needs of all the classes of gear types, and I believe it's a huge improvement. I wouldn't really have much to add to it. It is an improvement in just about all levels. So I've also, as you probably remember, had been a proposal for trying to assure the hook sector that they would have available quota later in the season. And there were a number of reasons at the public hearing that I did not attend. I'm sorry that I wasn't. I want to apologize to the commission and division for not being able to attend. It simply was not possible for me to be there, unfortunately. But at any rate, I think the industry had an opportunity to comment on those ideas, and they did, and they made sense. To hear that, in hindsight, it was probably the best way it could have been done, because everyone had an opportunity to comment on it. And it was obvious, from what I understand, that the industry did not see it as, there was no buy-in for it, so, or very, very minimal. Maybe down the road someday something like that could work, but what we have here today is an improvement, an immense improvement over last year, and I think it will work. And those are my comments. I would be in favor of voting positively for this when it comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. We, I think one of the things we learned from last year, and I'm not sure I'd classify it as a mistake, but certainly a learning experience, was that, how small unanticipated changes in effort can dramatically impact quota use in this fishery. And with the lack of a squid resource, throughout the summer, and that brought in a couple larger capacity vessels into the fishery, and then a few new entrants into the fishery who had obtained inshore boats who had obtained permit transfers from prior participants who may not have been active last season. That really sped up the use of that quota this year. And I think, in the back of a lot of folks' minds at that industry meeting was, okay, well, we saw what happened with the bad squid year last year. Now we have low cod limits for this coming year. Is there an opportunity for effort to be even higher again? And I think, this kind of takes that into consideration to really try to slow that quota. And we also have the fail-safe mechanism for September should, use be off in the other direction, that maybe there is a good squid year and, a couple boats don't show up, that, we can get at this quota. It's a balance between, trying to set aside quota for the year, but also taking the fish when it is profitable, because the value of the fish does decline as we go into the fall period, beginning in early September, because larger or areas to our south, Rhode Island, the mid-Atlantic states, they start to open their fishery at higher trip limits, and the coastwide supply goes up. Two things I failed to mention in my initial discussion, which I'll just briefly touch on now too, is that we do want to include in the public hearing notice an option to close weekend days. This was discussed at public meeting, and there wasn't a ton of support for it there, but we have heard from the recreational sector about this, and we want to give them the opportunity to comment on it. And it's also a good way to slow quota use as well. So it's something we don't want to take off the table yet for 2025, but we do understand it does provide the fleet with flexibility and is well supported among the active participants. The other thing is we do intend to continue the multi-day pilot program in 2025. After reviewing all the comment on that, we do think it is a valuable tool for both the industry participants who use it, providing them additional efficiency, not having to come into port every day, given tie-up fees, and helps reduce their overhead. And it also, we had an interesting comment from Rory at Red's Best that it really allows the dealers to send trucks to service the various Cape Cod ports where this fish is landed, because they don't have to go and pick up small amounts of fish. If we're at a 400-pound limit in August and only one boat comes in Woods Hole, it may not make sense for a truck to be sent there. But if they can manage it so that Woods Hole is coming in with, 3 boats are coming in one day, each with 800 pounds on the multi-day trip, then it makes sense to send a truck to Woods Hole and the various other small ports along the Cape. And given the infrastructure concerns, I think that's a huge consideration in terms of keeping this summertime fishery viable. So we do want to maintain that program for the economic benefits it provides to both the commercial fishing and seafood dealer sector, but we will take comment on how we can potentially improve the program, enhance accountability, and manage the use of the multi-day allowance in a way that maybe discourages some of the activity we saw or was alleged this past year, involving non-compliance with daily limits, taking, one trip that begins on one, in the evening of one calendar day and concludes the morning of the next in federal waters, fishing overnight and, landing 2 days worth of fish. Some of the high grading that was alleged as well. So there are some concerns about it that we do want to address, but we think that the program is still, really important for the industry. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Bill.
may I have a comment again, please?
Yes.
Yes, Jared, I just want to mention something. A word of caution on the last part of your statement concerning this multiple day trip allowance. And you've mentioned also 3 times in this discussion the fact that cod quotas being so low are going to drive fishermen to do things that they haven't done previously in this fishery. And I caution the division and the commission to understand that there are larger boats that with this opportunity for multiple days worth of fish to be landed, not to diminish the need for economy on the part of those buyers who will be traveling down to the ports for small amounts of fish, which they have done, by the way, historically for many, many years and seem to have been profitable in it. That we're going to see an enormous rate of catch that you didn't anticipate. And I think we'll be right back where we were last year with an early closing. And in fact, it will be even earlier than it was this year, despite all of the efforts that are built into this new proposal. I really think that that's a mistake. And I used that term in the previous description, perhaps too loosely. It was a learning experience for sure. This one, I do believe, will be a mistake if we allow for multiple day trip landings and the other implications that are along with it for the need for us to be aware of what's happening in terms of obeying the guidelines of this program versus those people who will attempt to take advantage of it. They'll be driven by hard economic realities that are going to be facing them with these groundfish cuts. And I hate to see anybody get in trouble because they simply have to pay their bills. if the rule is set up ahead of time so that they understand where they're standing, it would be a lot better than to have enforcement down there at the docks constantly, looking for people who are trying to make a living. Those are my feelings on it. I don't see anybody get in trouble over this, and I don't want to see the quota cut caught earlier in the year than we anticipate it should be with these changes. So those are my comments. I feel quite strongly about that.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions for Jared? Questions?
Shelley?
I guess this is more of a comment picking back off of Bill's comment, but if now is not the appropriate time, I can wait.
Go for it.
I was just going to say that the multi-day program has been really important for our boats on the island. I think getting catch on the ferry and having, you know, less ferry trips, reservations, etc., has allowed for some newer boats to come on to the scene and land their catch here. And it's really been critical, I think, to keeping those businesses going out on this island. So I know that there's some issues with it, but I do think that, like has been mentioned with the Cape and the buyer out there, it really also is an important aspect of keeping this fishery going. So I understand and respect Bill's comments, of course, and maybe there's a good compromise in between, but it's been really essential out here.
Thank you, Shelley. Any other comments or questions?
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
So Jared, I don't know if it's a comment or a question on two different things. This program, which Bill has addressed and Shelley has just addressed, as I recall, sitting on the commission, it was initiated for the small boat fleet for fishermen who had to travel. They didn't live on Cape Cod. They may have lived in Marshfield or Green Harbor. They left the boats here on the Cape. And that was the original intent of the pilot program, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. But now,
Sure. So the original intent was so that day boats with the fish
Right.
moving further east and the cost of
right,
overhead costs, be it fuel or dockage, ice, you know, going up and not at the same rate as fish prices, that this would allow boats with the lack of a buy boat on Nantucket to, you know, sit on a door overnight, fish one day, sit on a door overnight, and land 2 days worth of fish and not have to steam, you know, 20 miles each way to each day. And so that was the original intent back in 2019.
right. I understand that. But I also understand that with the lack of codfish allocation this coming year and for years to come, most likely, and the number of MCAP permits that have been issued over the years, what are there, 85? And the size of the vessels, I would somehow like to maintain this program for the smaller boats if possible. And we heard at that meeting, Jared, and I saw the eye contact amongst a lot of the captains when they spoke about boats fishing federal waters at night to get their second day's catch. So I think enforcement's going to have to play a major role in maintaining this program and maintaining the essence of the program, the reason why it was established in the first place. Because I believe, as does Bill, and Shelley has seen it, she just said that on the island of Martha's Vineyard, the number of vessels that are offloading there now, it's good for them, it's good for the buyers, but enforcement's going to have to be critical in maintaining this program. So, and then I'd like to move on to period 2 on your chart, over under trip limits. If I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of conversation about where it reads, if 75% of the quota is taken, there was a lot of conversation about giving the director the discretion, like say if the number is 74%, not 75% of the quota is taken by August 15th, if he can make a judgment call without having to come back to the commission, without having to go out to public hearings. Do you recall that?
I do, Ray, and we can't write a rule that accommodates that. That's great in theory, but we can't write a regulation that says, you know, if the director thinks that we're gonna do this. I mean, it either has to be, you know, a date certain and a percent certain, or we have to go through the in-season adjustment process. We can't build that type of discretion into a rule.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
all
Ray,
right.
let me speak on that. I really I agree with Jared. I don't want that kind of discretion. I think, as Bill Amaru used the term, you know, learning from past mistakes. I think Jared's done a nice job of listening to the fleet and actually drafting a rule that would accomplish these goals. I think it's, as I mentioned back in August, I think it's important to create a system with predictability that, you know, everybody in the fleet can watch our quota managed species website and kind of anticipate things and not have stuff come out of the director's office that was unanticipated. I mean, it's bad enough that quota the landings can be unanticipated, but if then the director does stuff that's not predicted, I think it creates a much more difficult situation. So I would I mean, I appreciate the confidence that a lot of the fleet members, put in the director, but I think it's a better arrangement to do it as we've done it here. And I would like to comment that about the origins of the pilot program to allow 2 days catch. It was to accommodate what, in my mind, because I proposed it, was the boats that weren't fishing at night, that were fishing in state waters. We wrote this so that, with the implication or the understanding that, yeah, even if they started the trip at noon or even later, that they were not fishing at night. So, Ray, I don't know when you say enforcement has to get involved to keep this program, honest. We actually don't have rules that says you can't fish at night. But it was intended to accommodate boats that weren't fishing at night because they were the small boat fleet that was that didn't want to have to steam all the way back. So that's something we can continue to think about. I mean, the pilot program has permit conditions that don't have to go through the CMR, so we can amend that. We can work with the commission and try to figure out better ways to tweak that.
So from what you just said, I'm understanding on an LOA that the boats that do fish, land a 2-day catch, we will restrict them to daylight fishing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, there's nothing in the current LOA that says you have to do that. But yes, I'm saying that was the target audience or the target beneficiary for this program, were the boats fishing in state waters.
Yeah.
And so I think it's worthy of more discussion, especially if this is causing a lot of anxiety about this so-called 2-day trip occurring in half a day.
Right. Well, thank you.
And I don't
Jared,
know.
Jared, by the way, I thought you did a great job. I know this was yours. You were given this assignment, and I'm not being critical of your work whatsoever. It's just I had some questions and thoughts. That's all.
No worries. I'm happy to take the comments and the questions. And Ray, I think one of the things we have to look at, because boats can, the boats are federally permitted or often permitted in multiple states. There is no federal night closure. So I think it's really hairy to put a night closure on this program for federal waters. But one of the things we could look at would be something like a length limit. As we're going to be speaking of in a few minutes, the lobster limits for draggers, that's a daily catch limit based on numbers of hours at sea. And, that's something we could look at. is that, you can't take that second limit until, unless that trip is 24 hours or longer.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, there's ways to get at this, but I think we want to hear from the fleet as to, a little bit more as to, what the limitations here should be. And we could certainly consider them for this coming year. And I think there's interest in doing that. But I think that's along with maintaining, the program in some capacity because it does provide, an economic benefit to a large segment of the day boat fleet, as well as some offshore boats and the dealer sector.
Yes. Well, as Bill stated earlier, I would support something like this, and I'm happy to see that. I heard the public response with the hook fishermen down at that public hearing. There were a handful of them, and even after that meeting, one of them called me. But I'm happy to see that the hook fishermen will be able to fish beyond, the end of August here with this 20%. What is it after? Well, 90%. You're leaving 10% for the horseshoe, the crab harvesters, and the hook fishermen will get a shot at those fish also.
Yeah, 60,000 pounds is 10%. So 60,000 pounds of 200 is 300 trips.
Yeah.
So that's a good amount of trips,
Well,
leaving out.
Right. Oh, I appreciate that because, we're trying to encourage people in all facets of the industry, not only the otter trawlers, but the hook fishermen. So thank you very much, Jared. Questions or comments for Jared?
Not saying anything else, I'll share the agenda again.
Well, we're moving on to discussion items. Protected species update. I presume this will be Mr. Glenn, Robert Glenn. I believe you've got the floor on this.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'll share my screen here and I'll get rolling. Okay. Can folks see a slideshow at this point?
No.
This always kills me. Okay.
There you go.
Good. Everyone can see a slideshow now?
I see it on my end here.
It's your presenter display, not the single screen display.
And Jared, how do I fix that?
You choose which screen. If you go back to share, you should be able to, swap presenter view and slideshow. That might do it for you. No. I usually do it by choosing the screen that has the full slideshow if you have two screens up.
That work?
There you go.
Thank you. Sorry for the technical issues. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to give a brief update this morning about protected species work that's been going on, including a quick update on right whale population status, upcoming meeting schedules for the Atlantic large whale take reduction team, the ship speed rule, and then a bunch of work that DMF has been doing with kind of expanding its protected species program. Okay, now I need to Okay. So a little bit of a bright spot for North Atlantic right whales. The NOAA Fisheries just released its most updated population estimate. And so the good news is that The current estimate is 370 individuals. That's the most recent, and that's an increase from the 356 that we had in 2022. And so the population has showed that essentially the sharp decline since 2010s have slowed. And this is because we've had a much lower mortality rates. If you look at the figure to the right, you see that the blue dots with the bars associated with them, and you see those really high mortality events that occurred in 2017 and 2019 that precipitated these large scale declines have really moderated and have slowed down fairly dramatically. And similarly, during that time period, the really low birth rates that the population had experienced have increased again to more moderate rates. And so the combination of those two things, we're starting to see slight improvements. That said, ship strikes and entanglements still continue to be the primary sources of mortality and still exceed potential biological removal. So coast-wide, there's still work that needs to be done to try to bring this in check to further allow for enhanced population growth. But in 2024, we had 20 calves born, but so far 5 of them have been either confirmed dead or missing and presumed dead. Nonetheless, that's still a pretty good birthing year. So we're cautiously optimistic that the really bad trends we saw in the early teens are starting to move away now, and that we're seeing positive signs for the population. As most of you know, Congress put a 5-year hold on additional Atlantic large whale take reduction team rulemaking through the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023. And so you may think that that's, we all have a room to take a breath and wait. However, the NOAA Fisheries plan is to implement those regulations by December of 2028. And so because of their lengthy rulemaking process, it requires that they develop their final recommendations by January of 2026 for additional measures for the lobster fisheries. And so a couple things we expect. I'm going to go over a quick timeline in a second, but we also expect for in early 2025 to NOAA Fisheries to release an environmental impact statement for the gillnet and other trap gear based changes to the plan. And so Congress's Consolidated Appropriations Act did not apply to anything but the Northeast lobster fishery. And so NIMS proceeded with rulemaking process for both gillnet and other trap pot gear. And so those changes are going to be released for public comment this coming year. The one bright spot that I anticipate is because the last time that the team was together working on risk reduction, we were tasked with a really almost insurmountable goal of trying to reduce risk by 90%. And that was based off the really extraordinarily high mortality rates that we saw in 2017 and 2019. Because NOAA Fisheries uses a 5-year average mortality rate to calculate its PBR and then the percent reduction in mortality we have to achieve, those really bad years now have improved, and those will not be in that average. So what we anticipate to learn this coming year is that our percent risk reduction is going to be substantially less than what it was at 90%. I don't know what that number is yet, but because of the positive population trends, we anticipate that it won't be nearly as onerous as it was the last time the team got together. So NOAA Fisheries released this a little earlier, late summer, early fall, this schedule right here for the take reduction team. And so this coming fall, they're starting to have a few informational webinars to inform the team of updated population estimates and an inventory of all entanglement incidents. In December, they're going to provide an update of the decision support 2 model and reveal that. And then in January, essentially, well, actually, in 2025 is when the real work really starts to begin. In March, we have a 2-day in-person meeting in Providence where that's when they'll first reveal to us exactly what our targets are going to be for risk reduction and what the focuses are going to be. And then we have after that, a pretty consistent schedule throughout the summer with a July meeting and another November team meeting where we really have to dig in and come up with risk reduction measures. It's my intent after the March meeting, once I understand what the targets are, would be much like last time to kind of convene small regional groups with working with fishers to kind of digest the issue and get their feedback on best ways to proceed. We took that approach the last time around by bringing small regional groups of fishers together to kind of hash out some of the risk reduction issues. And we'll do the same this time. I'm not scheduling those meetings until after March, until I get, exactly, I understand the landscape better and know what our management targets are going to be. Ultimately, as I said, NOAA Fisheries, their goal is to have basically a completed package of risk reduction measures in place by January of 2026. And so that's a fairly expedited, ambitious schedule. And then after that, after January 2026, then NOAA goes into its rulemaking process that, has comment period, NEPA analysis, issue a biological opinion, et cetera. And so with their final plan of implementing it, by January of 29. Dan, you have your hand raised?
Bob, one of the things I've heard in some of the meetings I've attended, some of the higher level meetings, is part of the rationale for this early, the early work on this. It appears to be almost like ahead of schedule, that if there's going to be significant investments needed, that the fleet can have sufficient time to get ready, such as ropeless fishing technologies, or on the mobile gear side, the ability to detect them with the ropeless or the on-demand buoy systems. And so that's another reason they want to get this stuff done well in advance, so that the industry can be ready for the 2029 effective date, whether that's happen or not, but that is part of the rationale they're talking about at the level.
That's consistent with what I've heard as well. Thanks for bringing that up, Dan. Okay. Another thing that we spent a fair amount of time working on this summer is working with our coastal zone management to provide comments on modifications to the NOAA ship speed rule. NOAA came out with a proposed ship speed rule. Well, actually, it came out in 2023, and at the time, DMF did provide substantive comments on the rule. This figure to the right is a pretty good description of the rule in a nutshell. Essentially, the green area here is the proposed Atlantic seasonal speed zone. This entire green area to the right would be subject to a 10 knot speed limit rule from November 1st through May 30th. And that's a really huge area in the heart of some of the United States' most busiest shipping ports, etc. DMF, completely agrees that ship speed or ship strikes are one of the primary causes of North Atlantic right whale mortality, and we need to be, addressed. We were more in favor of a much more surgical approach that really tried to focus ship speed reductions in areas of high right whale density. One of our biggest concerns was that NOAA Fisheries expanded the ship speed rule to include all of Nantucket Sound, which in our view was not really appropriate based on a lack of sightings. We only have, in the last decade, we only have about a half a dozen, what we call opportunistic sightings reported inside of Nantucket Sound, and none of the surveillance that occurs in that area has indicated it has found any right whales, nor has some limited acoustic monitoring that has been done. And so this year, NOAA Fisheries went through what's called a federal consistency process with all the states through coastal zone management, and essentially we had an opportunity to work with CZM to kind of reiterate some of our concerns about them expanding the ship speed rule into Nantucket Sound. And so we did, CZM submitted a federal consistency objection to the rule. It was one of many states along the Atlantic coast that also submitted this consistency objection. And our, as I said, our primary concerns were that the ship speed rule in Nantucket Sound was based on insufficient data to support implementation. And overall, we thought that the rule was a little bit too much of a reach relative to potential impacts or potential risk of ship strike being low in those areas. And so at this point, we don't know what the fate of the ship speed rule is. It's been sitting in the Department of Commerce, my understanding, for several months now. And I anticipate that it's there's probably some uncertainty relative to both the election cycle that we just had and also because of the fairly broad scale pushback that it received along the coast. So I don't have much more to report as relative to what the outcome is going to be here. I think at this point it's fairly uncertain, and we'll have to wait and see. So just an update on the DMF Protected Species Program. Through the funding that we received through the Consolidated Appropriations Act, we were able to make substantial in expansions in our Protected Species Program. And so, as you all know, prior to this expansion, it was just Aaron Burke and myself primarily working on protected species issues in DMF. Now with this funding, we have an opportunity to expand that and do a lot more work. And so we've promoted Aaron to oversee this. And I really have to give a shout out to Aaron. Aaron's been really burning the candle at both ends, trying to implement this really large scale monitoring program, purchase all this acoustic equipment and at the same time try to hire several new people. And she's really done a great job. Along with continuing to manage our core work with our grants to CCS for aerial surveillance and working on things like comments for the ship speed rule. So shout out to Erin for her work. But we're really excited. We have 3 new hires, a science and monitoring lead, Leah Crow, who will be starting in mid-January, an acoustician. Her name is Manali Rage Colt, and she'll be starting at the end of December. And then a field biologist, Emma Fowler, who started here at the beginning of November. And this team is part of our, will be our research and monitor team branch of the Protected Species Program, who will really have a focus on monitoring, occupancy and whale presence in Massachusetts, with an eye towards allowing us to have the appropriate information and data to efficiently manage entanglement risk and ship strike risk. We've also taken some steps. Oh, one other thing I should note is pretty exciting is we're a little excited, extra excited with 2 of the staff in that we were able to, for once, poach a couple of NOAA Fisheries employees to come in our direction instead of losing them to NOAA Fisheries, because both Leah Crow and Emma Fowler are both contractors for NOAA Fisheries. So we were excited about to be able to do that. An additional thing is that we've refocused a few of our other staff to focus as a protected species gear team, working on ropeless fishing and compliance assistance issues. And so when I say compliance assistance, that's the program whereby we provide commercial fishermen or fishers with weak rope, gear marking supplies to comply with both state and federal protected species risk reduction rules. And with that, Dave Joseph, who's formerly with our conservation engineering program, and Brendan Riley formerly of our invertebrate fisheries program, have been reassigned and are working on these efforts. And, in a nutshell, the focus on all of this work is trying to, minimize entanglement and ship strike risk to North Atlantic right whales while promoting efficient and profitable commercial fishing in the maritime industry. And this is something that all the staff really take the mission they take seriously, and something we're really excited to be able to hopefully really advance the state of knowledge so we can do the best job possible at reducing risk without causing undue harm to our fisheries. Part of this work that the science and monitoring team will be working on is our passive acoustic monitoring network. This figure to the left is a map of proposed sites that we'll have with real time. The ones that say MA that I'm pointing to here in these squares are passive acoustic monitoring archival units that DMF will be maintaining, and these listen 24/7 for right whale noises. And then with our staff, our acoustician will be able to take those recordings and use them to better understand right whale presence in our waters. And two of these are real time. This site here in Cape Cod Bay and this one up here up off of Cape Ann are real time. And so these are a collaboration with Woods Hole Oceanographic, and we're contracting them to place these out. And so these are our 24/7 real time monitors that we can go and listen to real time. Part of the reason for these is to assist with our dynamic management of the fishery. As you all know, at the end of April, when the whales start to leave, and we have an opportunity to open the fishery as soon as May 1st, but in some cases have to extend the closure if right whales stick around. And so with these real-time acoustic buoys, this gives us additional piece of information in addition to our aerial surveillance to be able to really make sound decisions on opening the fisheries. And so we're excited. Those real-time buoys will be deployed this coming February for the right whale season. So that'll be great. And then right around that same time or sometime early in 2024, we hope to get the other archival passive units out as well. Those are dependent. They're held up. We're held up on deployment a little bit on those. We'd hope to have them out this fall, but a couple of glitches is one that the units are made by a company in New Zealand, and they're their only place. They're a sole source, but the Commonwealth has difficulty doing business with them because it has to do with the method of payment that they'll accept and what the Commonwealth is willing to issue. We're able to resolve it by having NOAA Fisheries purchase them for us, and then us transferring the money to NOAA Fisheries. And so, long story short, we just got them all in about 2 weeks ago. So it's been a little bit of delay. And now also we're finally getting the staff on board. So marching orders for those new staff is to, as soon as they get up to speed, is to get those prepared and get those out in the water. And hopefully we'll have them in by this winter. So pretty exciting developments. And what's really neat is this is a kind of it's a coast-wide collaborative. So we're collaborating with NOAA Fisheries, with the state of Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. And essentially we'll have kind of broad scale coverage of everywhere from southern New England up to the Canadian border for acoustic monitoring. And we'll really be able to hone in and get a better idea of seasonal presence absence of right whales across the whole Northwest Atlantic. So pretty excited about that. And then lastly, we've been doing a bunch of on-demand gear research this year. Couple of different things. So we've been investing in and supporting research to understand how on-demand fishing may impact commercial fisheries in Mass. And so we've been doing this work for a while. One of those efforts is working with a contractor from Homeris Strategies, name is Noah Oppenheim, to do these essentially economic efficiency analyses and also modeling of what the economics of on-demand fishing are. And NOAA is working on kind of phase 3 of that work and kind of looking in close detail of kind of, efficiencies of how long it takes to haul this gear and how that impacts bottom line for fishers. And so that work is ongoing. In addition to that, though, our own DMF gear team, we purchased several on-demand units this year, and this summer engaged in a series of field trials and studies. And the first focus of this work is looking at gear density and essentially doing iterative testing and deployments of this gear at ever decreasing spacing between each gear to determine what spacing can fishers get away with using this gear before gear conflict occurs. And you can see some of the plots in the right here that show some screenshots of the software that we use to mark this gear virtually, the Trap Tracker, showing parallel deployments of this gear. And we were, from my understanding, we were able to successfully deploy gear as close as, I want to say, 40 or 50 feet without having any crossing or gear conflict. So we're pretty encouraged by that preliminary results. The final thing I have to report on is another part of the research is we're about to imminently announce a gear grant program for on-demand fishing gear for fishermen. Through this program, fishermen will be able to be reimbursed for up to $25,000 worth of gear related to on-demand fishing gear. This can include the pop-up buoys systems. It can include satellite systems for the virtual marking and trap tracker system, or it can also include things like modifications to the vessel, like putting through hull transducers to be able to trigger acoustic gear. And so this announcement should be coming out later, at the end of this year. And we've already gauged, pre-interest. I believe we have about 20 fishermen who are interested in this program, but more details on that will be coming out soon. And actually, I did have one more thing, and just an update on an incidental take permit. NOAA Fisheries just let us know that the draft that we submitted in July, they've reviewed. They're in their final phase of adding comments to, and we anticipate that we're going to get that back by the end of this year. Based on their anecdotal feedback, is that we're in pretty good shape, and we're anticipating to be able to submit the final application and conservation plan in early 2025. And from there, NOAA Fisheries' timeline is that they'll initiate their NEPA analysis. They brought staff on board to do that, and then have a public comment period. And they estimate it'll be about 1 year before the permit is awarded. But it looks like we're in pretty good shape so far. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Bob Glenn?
Chris McGuire.
Chris, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, thanks, great report. Couple questions about the real-time buoys. I know that many of those that are operated by Woods Hole Oceanographic, they share the output in real time on their website. Curious if that's an expectation as well, whether we'll have real-time access to to the data coming off of those. And also, I guess a second question is there any other information being collected and transmitted at those buoys besides the DMON data, temperature or telemetry or any of those other things?
Great question, Chris. So yeah, my plan is to work with our department IT people to potentially develop a real-time dashboard. I think there's an opportunity here, and there'd be a lot of interest by people and maybe even educators to kind of be able to go on real time and especially during our right whale season when we have Cape Cod. One of the monitors is going to be in Cape Cod Bay, which is, as the largest aggregation of right whales in the world. So it should be very active. And so, yeah, I'm really hoping to be able to set up a real time, dashboard that folks can go on to and see what's going on with right whales in our area. Relative, I believe that yes, that all of those buoy real time buoys also collect surface bottom temperature, salinity, but I'll have to confirm that. I'll have to talk with Aaron Burke, but I'm pretty sure that they'll be collecting that information as well.
Yeah, if folks are interested, you could check out, there's the WHOI website. If you type in robots, the number 4 and whales, that'll lead you to Mark Baumgartner, who's one of the principal investigators. We've actually done a lot of work with him with DMF staff on gliders and other things as well in the past, but that'll give you a sense of what their information looks like. But I do think it's pretty cool. And I guess my last question is, I was wondering whether or not there was consideration of a buoy like this in Nantucket Sound, sort of tying together the question about the speed rule and collecting more data there. I don't know if there is an existing PAM buoy in Nantucket Sound, but it seems like building up some data about that area might be useful for the ongoing conversation about that.
No, great comments, Chris. And so essentially, two things is one, we are putting an archival unit in the middle of Nantucket Sound that's right adjacent to the ferry routes to Nantucket. But that's the archival unit. We did just discuss the potential to also put a real-time unit. It's really a funding unit. The real-time units are about $500,000 up front and about a $200,000 annual maintenance fee, which we would probably could afford with this CAA funding. The problem is that the basically what the CAA can be spent on is really fairly narrowly defined to mitigating entanglement risk. It doesn't really give us a lot of latitude to also, when the reason primarily would be ship strike or ship speed rule type data collection. And so, I've talked with the commissioner, and we've had some internal discussions about the potential, to see if we can come up with additional funding to do that. But at this point, I'm not sure what the status, but at least at the bare minimum, we'll have our archival unit there.
Thanks. And just one last question about that is, I'm curious what the rough schedule would be for retrieving and downloading the archival data. Is it like annual or every 6 months, or what's the sort of ballpark thinking on that?
Yeah, our plan, based on conversations with NOAA Fisheries, who have a lot of experience with this, is that it's going to be about every 3 to 4 months, probably 3 times a year. And we may have to adjust that depending on how much of the hotspots there are. I mean, a typical download trip for one unit is something like after 3 months is about a terabyte worth of data, and then we have like a dozen of those. So it's a lot of data management. So the longer the interval you go for, the more of a mess of data that you have to deal with and analyze. So we're looking right now, logistically, if possible, about every 3 to 4 months.
Great. Well, thanks. I think this is a good initiative for the DMF to get engaged with, and that's a great update. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Questions or comments for Bob Glenn?
Bill Ammerer?
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, it's very thorough work you've got there. I got to make a comment and suggestion, sort of thinking a little bit the way I think Suki would be thinking if he were here. The chartlet that you showed that had the trawls laid fairly close together, I think it was in Buzzards Bay. I don't know if you want to put it back up, but I remember what it looked like, and the setting was close as maybe 40 to 50 feet together, that's good to know that it can be done. I mean, we fishermen pretty good at that kind of thing, figuring the tide, but the location, and I don't know if the state has any input as to where this kind of work gets experimented, but it would have been helpful to have seen deeper water and in a more appropriate region, not that the Buzzards Bay isn't, fishable area for trap trawls, but areas east of the Cape, south of the Cape and the shoals, up off of the bank, Selwagen Bank, and in the Gloucester region, for those same kinds of experiments to be done would be a lot more, there'd be greater veracity in the results. And the other comment I make is the need for developing continuous programs for gear recovery when and if this program ever gets to fruition and the guys start using these things, seeing how much effort is being put into scalloping these days, and as the fishery expands because of a lack of concentrated scallop availability. I mean, the stock is pretty low right now. I don't know how long it's going to stay this way, but the boats are roaming around all over the place trying to find a little spot to catch a few scallops. And it troubles me to think that they may be fishing close to these unmarked trawls and the amount of gear loss that could occur because of it. So I hope that there's some thought being given to the future of gear recovery, as well as to the other aspects of the programs. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, and good comments and good observation about the initial work. The on-demand work we did in Buzzards Bay this summer it's kind of, think of it almost as like the first phase of test tank work. In a vacuum without competing gear types and difficult ocean conditions, can we make this work? And that's phase one. We didn't want to introduce all those other variables because, as you can imagine, these are highly expensive units that we're putting down. Our staff is gaining familiarity with deployment and retrieval of this, and we want to try to get the basics of how it could work in sanitary conditions. Next phases would go into exactly what you had mentioned, which would be doing it in more difficult areas to fish, whether that be the local oceanographic conditions and/or in higher gear density areas with competing gear types, and also working with mobile gear fishers to see how close they can fish next to this gear. And so those are all things that we're planning to do. This was, phase one. We just got the gear. Let's get our feet wet and see what we can learn about it. And you're spot on about the, how mobile gear fisheries are going to interact with this, and it's one of DMF's primary concerns. One of the things that this grant program that we're setting aside a certain portion of that money specifically to work with mobile gear fishers who are interested in getting the technology on their vessels to be able to detect this gear. And so we've worked with folks at the New England Council who are looking at this, and we're trying to identify fishermen who may want to participate and get some of this technology on their boats and to see how well they can use that technology to stay away from gear. But
okay, very good, Bob. Those are great responses. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bob. Any other questions or comments for Bob Glenn?
Not seeing anything else from the commission, Mr. Chair.
Then we can move this along. November 2024 Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to take this one as well. Just give me one sec. Okay. Right. So I had the pleasure of chairing the most recent Shellfish Advisory Panel in Dan's place. Dan had a meeting in Newport, Rhode Island that he had to attend, and so I had the pleasure of chairing it. And the meeting went very well. We had really strong attendance there, and we kind of dove into a number of primary issues. One of the things that we talked about kind of at length was early on in the SAP, there was several different working groups were identified to address different needs. And because of changes in personnel at DMF, and also not having losing several DMF staff, we're not able to fully stand up all those committees over the previous years. And so at the meeting, we try to gauge interest to make sure that, what to move forward. And so a couple of those that we talked about were the aquaculture permitting subgroup. And, our DMF staff had conducted a survey and did some preliminary analysis to try to look at how each of the different towns in Massachusetts deal with transfers of aquaculture permits. And essentially what we found in a nutshell is that there's not a lot of consistency from town to town, and some towns don't even really have specific protocols or operating procedures on the book. And so, there's a need to continue that working group to better flesh that out. And one of the primary products we're thinking would be having that group put together essentially a white paper that describes the issue, and then in addition to that, maybe mapping out some best operating practices or procedures there for towns to use as guidance when dealing with this. So hopefully we can instill some consistency. The other thing that subgroup we discussed was looking at the seed supply. Every year, growers throughout Massachusetts, when they're buying their seed, have kind of varying degrees of struggles trying to get seed. We have one seed producer in Massachusetts on the Cape, ARC, and a lot of our growers do rely on them, but there's also a few in Maine that they rely on. And what we've learned is that for reasons that folks can't really put their finger on so far, is that the team tends to be a lot of interannual variability in the success and viability of the seed that folks are getting. And so there was interest among the SAP to stand this group up, get folks together, and again, try to really, drill down in identifying what the needs are and try to determine if there are steps that the industry and or DMF can take to help secure better sources of seed for our growers in Massachusetts. And then finally, on those working groups, in addition, there was some additional discussion about bulk tagging and the potential to develop a pilot program for aquaculture in Massachusetts. As you're aware, and Dan, you can speak to this probably as well. Dan had, essentially, we had put this group together, kind of looked into the issue and kind of gauge interest among a broad cross section of growers and dealers and et cetera. And I guess the way I would characterize it is that there wasn't a broad consensus on how best to succeed, and because of that, how best to proceed, and as a result of that, DMF under Dan's direction has decided to at this point not pursue bulk tagging, but again, we still are hearing from growers that they're interested in pursuing a pilot program. Dan, I don't know if you want to add any additional context to that, or.
Yeah, it essentially puts the burden of tagging from the harvester onto the dealer, and we've had two pretty bad cases of mandated recalls of shellfish from closed areas, and we're just really concerned that that amending our tagging practices would, first of all, create a much bigger burden on the dealers, but also result in much larger levels of recalls. And so, as it's been said, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. But then again, I understand that it's really the burden that's falling on one party or the other, the harvester versus the dealer. I think for now, tagging is important, and I don't want to make changes that are going to result in any unintended consequences. I prefer the group focus on some other more critical issues, but I'll remain open-minded.
Thanks, Dan. And then one of the primary topics that we spoke at length at the meeting and took up probably the biggest portion of the meeting was talking about kind of this really big issue that DMF and the aquaculture industry is dealing with, and that's closures related to wastewater treatment plant buffer zones and closures related to combined sewage overflows, known as CSOs. And this continues to be a really big issue for DMF and for the growers. We've, just to give you a little flavor, because of CSO closures in this past year, growers in Buzzards Bay have had 170 days closed to harvest, and it's really putting a pretty significant impact on their ability to harvest and get product in, to the market especially in prime time in the summer when their product is worth the most value. And this has been a real struggle. At issue here is we have in the closures in Buzzards Bay are related to CSOs from the city of New Bedford, and the CSO problem in New Bedford is large. I believe there's on the order of 18 CSOs that occur. 2 or 3 of them routinely are the primary ones that cause large issues in Buzzards Bay, and in some cases we've seen in a 24 period up to 20 million gallons of untreated combined sewage overflow go right into Buzzards Bay. DMF hands are fairly tied on this because they're, in the model ordinance under the National Shellfish Sanitation Program, that there's pretty hardwired rules relative to closures around CSOs or any untreated sewage events, and that requires us to close down an area for 21 days. We have to the size of that area is based on the amount of the number of the amount of sewage overflows that occur, and then having to dilute that down to the public health standard of 14 colony forming count, fecal coliform counts essentially. And because of that, when we have these CSOs, these closures can extend and affect growers in both Dartmouth and in Fairhaven and Nascatucket. So we do have the opportunity to test out of those closures after 7 days, and we have been doing that when we have the opportunity. Well, we get samples of shellfish meats from the growers, and we run male-specific cauliflage tests or MSC tests, which test for viral load. And if those come out negative, we can then open after a 7-day period. But the issue is that every time we have another rainfall event that causes another CSO, it resets that clock. And so in many cases this summer, we had issues whereby we would get, in the fifth or sixth day, and then we'd have another CSO that would reset the clock. And it's really been an issue. So we're, currently we're pursuing funding to do a few things, and that includes trying to use additional technology through these tryptophan sensors that essentially their tryptophan is a digestive enzyme you probably heard about. They say that's the enzyme that makes you sleepy after you eat turkey dinner on Thanksgiving, but it's also reflective of digestive enzyme or fecal, can be reflective of fecal coliform in the water. And so what we're hoping to be able to do is validate the use of these sensors and place them, and then at strategic locations near the CSOs, and then also at the growing areas, to be able to develop a data set that to try to determine the extent to which the CSOs actually impact pathogen load, next to shellfish growing areas. So, a couple of different veins we've been working with. We've had several meetings with both legislators and growers to talk about this. And so we're trying to get funding through legislative aids. We're also in the process of submitting a grant into there's a recent grant opportunity that NOAA Fisheries put out. I apologize, the exact opportunity, the name escapes me, but we're in the process of developing a research proposal to apply for grant money to get that. And so we're hopeful to be able to do that. But nonetheless, it's going to be a long haul, because even with collecting that information, it's going to take time to validate that, and then to get FDA approval that's sufficient to use that technology to move forward to manage. And so, as you can imagine, that took a fairly large portion of the meeting up, and had some fairly substantive discussions. And then finally, the only other things we discussed, the primary things we discussed, was we gave the SAP an update on the shellfish depuration plant, which Dan mentioned issues in his opening remarks. And then finally, also we talked about updates to DMF personnel. And so it was, since our last SAP meeting, we're pretty happy to report that for the first time in about 2 years, our shellfish program is finally fully staffed. We have all our growing area biologists, and also our supervisors and program managers in each of our North and South Shore facilities. And so it's nice to be fully staffed finally. That said, it's still a struggle, because with these CSO and wastewater treatment plant issues, because of changes in a large portion of our area to conditionally approved areas, it's increased our sampling load by 60%. And so our shellfish staff is still struggling, and both our field staff and laboratory staff are struggling to keep pace of the increased workload. I think that's primarily the points that I have for that. Jared, I don't know if there's anything that I missed that you think I should have touched on, but.
No, Bob, I think that covers the high points of the November 6th meeting pretty well.
So then we'll have questions or comments for Bob Glenn.
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. We can move along to the law enforcement focus group meeting, which was held a couple of weeks ago, and everybody received Jared's package on that, what was discussed.
Raymond, that memo was released yesterday. I don't know if the commission has to read it through, but I'm going to defer to Jared on the discussion on this, since my audio seems to be kind of sketchy. I don't think you want to hear a lot from me if it's not continuous. So why don't we just take any questions, and I'll let Jared and any of the other staff who are in some of these specific areas take questions.
Yeah, so I'll kind of run through high level summary of the meeting, and which I think that the written document that was sent out yesterday does as well. But we talked about several issues at this meeting. The first of which was lobster catch and landings by trawlers, and it's unfortunate Suki couldn't make it today, because I know this was an issue that he's particularly interested in. But we're on track to talk about it this January at MLA's annual weekend. And I think the take-home message here is that there's two related, somewhat related issues going on. First is that there is some enforcement issues surrounding LMA declarations and the requirement that draggers adhere to the most restrictive rule of the LMAs that they annually declare on their permit. Law enforcement generally thought that the rule as written was enforceable, but requested we do some annual outreach to make sure that our offshore lobster permit holders, the draggers and gill netters know this. And there was some additional discussion about developing dragger specific gauge and V-notch limits, but that's probably best suited for a discussion at the ASMFC's lobster board, so that there's universal standards across the Northeast, where lobsters can be landed by non-trap fishermen, and so that it doesn't displace effort from one state to another. If we were to adopt more restrictive rules, we would be forcing catch to Rhode Island or New Hampshire. And then we got into the issue of that was raised by some lobster trap fishermen about targeted dragging effort on lobsters during the winter east of Provincetown, concerns about high grading and trip limit enforcement. And we looked into this, and some of the concerns were substantiated, some of the concerns weren't. And effectively what we found is from safest data and NEFOP data is that groundfish boats during a groundfish trip will have certain tows where they target lobster. There's likely non-compliance with the 24-hour aspect of the daily trip limit in some instances, that the lobsters for the whole trip limit, which is 500 lobsters on a 5-day plus trip, may be taken in one day, and not over the course of 5 days as the limit intended. And that these tows, there's a tow off Georges, or tows off east of Georgia, west of Georges rather, and tows off Provincetown where this is occurring. And we have no evidence to suggest that there's non-compliance with the dragger limit of 500 lobsters per trip, but that's difficult to parse because the rule is in count and the data is collected in poundage, but there's nothing in the data that really suggests that there's egregious violations. One of the considerations that we have moving forward would be to develop a trip limit that is based in poundage, so there is it mirrors the data being collected, so we can do a forensic audit. There's no evidence in the NEFOP data of substantial high grading or discarding of lobsters. And the one other issue that came up was that there are multiple lobster landings per trip, per groundfish trip. And we spoke with NOAA Fisheries, and they do allow this. The groundfish doesn't have to be offloaded when the boat comes in to land lobsters, and they can land lobsters multiple times during a groundfish trip. So if a groundfish trip is 10 or 15 days, they might be stopping over in Provincetown on day 5 and day 10 before heading back to Gloucester to offload, 5 days worth of lobster catch. So that's something we want to take up with, at the interstate level as well. Because again, there's an interest in not forcing this fishing effort and this catch into other states by adopting, more restrictive limits in Massachusetts than there's elsewhere in the Northeast. Talked about striped bass management. The two things we discussed were total length measurement, which we first brought to you at your September meeting. We've subsequently done some field work into this, and we've determined that the fanning of tails, the forced fanning of tails reduces the total length such that fish that are about 1.5 inches larger than the slot limit will, if you fan their tail, they'll be within the slot limit when comparing natural length to forced fan tail length. On the pinch tail side, you get a few extra fish on the smaller end entering the slot limit than you do it, but it's not substantial. It's about less than 1/3 of an inch. So this kind of speaks to our initial proposal to require the forced pinching of the tail when measuring total length. That's something we'll go out with to public hearing this winter. Then we discussed the long-standing concern that our commercial striped bass fishery has a recreational component to it, whereby the open entry permit is obtained solely to either exceed bag limits or the slot limit. And while reported catch is only about 1.5, reported catch for personal uses, or fish that's coded for personal use, is only about 1.5% of total commercial striped bass harvest. There may be some underreporting there, and it's concerning that if that fish is being underreported because it's not being accounted for in the stock assessment, and it's not being counted, that commercial catch is not being counted against the quota because it's not being sold. and I think, Dan will tell you that at the interstate level, there's a lot of scrutiny of our commercial fishery and its open entry aspect. And we discussed to address this whether there would be, a benefit to requiring commercial fishers sell their striped bass catch, but that was generally thought to be difficult to enforce. And we're advised to, if we want to constrain some of the recreational or recreational activity, to consider moving to a limited entry program based on, using that control date and performance criteria, fish sold criteria. And law enforcement did provide us with some color that, a lot of what they see on boat-based activities is likely, real commercial striped bass fishing activity. But there's, some shore fishing activity that they think may be, kept for personal use. On protected species issues, we discussed the need to continue to haul, gear for buoy line marking rules, because that's really the realm of the coin of the realm now when it comes to risk and risk of entanglements and attribution of entanglements to certain jurisdictions, particularly as we move forward with our incidental take permit. And with that, we had further discussions about about how fish pot and conch pot gear that is set in federal waters by Massachusetts fishermen should be marked. There's a couple of issues here. We discussed them, I believe, back at the meeting in Kingston, and we're still working on a resolution. But in short, the federal government doesn't control the setting of fish or whelk pot gear in federal waters. If you have a shellfish permit, you can set conch pot gear in federal waters and land that catch in Massachusetts. And if you have a sea bass or scup federal permit and state permit, you can set fish pot gear in federal waters and land that fish in Massachusetts. So there is a concern about the proliferation of gear in federal waters, and the buoy line marking is crucial here, because if that gear is being marked as Massachusetts gear, well, it should be marked as Massachusetts gear because it's not being marked in state waters. It's not being fished in state waters, rather. And there's not a good gear marking system for this gear, and the remnant or the existing gear marking rules for the Northeast miscellaneous fish pot fisheries and the Atlantic largemouth take reduction plan are fairly similar to our state marking system, as they require 3 1-foot red marks or 3 2-foot red marks rather than 3 1-foot red marks rather than 4 2-foot red marks. So the likelihood that a gear could be misattributed to Massachusetts is there. So that's something that DMF's going to be focusing on to address this winter, is how to have this gear be marked in a way that it's clearly identifiable to federal waters, and not the Massachusetts mixed species spot trap fishery. On coastal sharks, we talked a bit about the targeting of white sharks from shore. This has been an issue that's been going on the Outer Cape for a couple of years. And it is illegal in our regs, but it really comes down to, MEP being able to prove that the fishing activity is targeted and not incidental. And that can be challenging. And some of the activity this summer has raised some public safety concerns, because, this fishing activity was occurring, among surfers on Outer Cape beaches, and there was some, user group conflicts there and public safety concerns there. So we looked around the coast to see what was being done elsewhere. And, we found that some states do describe or define shark fishing activity based on the gear used, hook size, leader length, and enact rules regarding that activity. And they also mandate the manual casting of baits when shark fishing. So those are things that we're looking into, which may include a potential prohibition on shark fishing on the outer Cape beaches to get at the white shark issue, and mandating casting maybe in all shark shore-based shark fishing activities, which would effectively eliminate the use of drones or kayaks to set baits. And that's something we'll come back to you with at the December, I think at the December meeting with a proposal for public hearing. There's also likely going to be a proposal for public hearing to clarify rules regarding the dogfish fin exemption to the shark fin prohibition. So the prohibition on shark fins in state law creates an exemption for dogfish lawfully finned by a shoreside processor. There's concern that that exemption may be used as a loophole to get around the shark fin rule or the shark fin prohibition. And we're considering requiring paperwork to demonstrate that if fins are possessed, they came from a lawful processor. And if you can't produce the paperwork, it's presumed that the fins are unlawfully possessed. And it also, when law enforcement encountered this year, they found they did some genetic testing on some shark fins they found in the market, and the genetic testing was obscured because of the use of formaldehyde in the processing of shark fins, which is just an anecdote I wanted to pass along because it's pretty gross and something to think about. We followed up with a focus group on the September discussion regarding false albacore and bonito limits, and I think we'll be coming to the full commission next month with a proposal to establish some type of possession limits to constrain the growth in this fishery on for the time being, absent a quota and federal plan on this, or interstate plan on this rather. And then the last issue we discussed, which was probably the most interesting issue in the afternoon, was findings by Officer Joe Gray up in Gloucester regarding the volumetric enforcement of menhaden trip limits. And in our regs, we have volumetric equivalencies for totes and barrels. So there's a poundage associated with each, and we mandate the storage of totes and barrels, or the storage of fish in totes and barrels during the 6,000 pound fishery. And what Officer Gray found was that there's about a 20 to a 30% discrepancy between the poundage that he weighs out in these totes and barrels and the poundage that we prescribe to them. We got our rule for Maine, who uses the same equivalency, and the actual poundage is about 20 to 30% over. Similarly, he found that in the large scale fishery, the industrial fishery at 120,000 and 25,000 pounds, that the fish is pumped out of the boats into what they call vats, which are just the big insulated fish boxes. And the industry standard for these is that each box weighs 1,800 pounds. And that's how, he had been figuring out trip limit compliance up to that point. But he started to weigh out the fish in these boxes, and he was finding that the fish weight was anywhere between about 18,000 pounds and 24,000 pounds, with a lot of the trips 1,800 pounds or 2,400 pounds, with a lot of these trips coming in at about 22 to 2,400 pounds. He reached out to colleagues in other states, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and found that, that this is the same industry standard there as well. So this appears to be a coastwide, issue. We did some additional research after this meeting, and we reached out to the fish box manufacturers, and it appears as though that there's 3 different style of vat that range in capacity between 1,750 pounds and 2,200 pounds, and that these different, you know, dimensioned vats may be part of what's attributing to this, you know, that they're using the larger vats that have a higher weight capacity than the smaller vat that has that 1,800 pound weight capacity. So, you know, this is something that we got to return to the ASMFC on, and discuss volumetric equivalencies and determine to what extent, you know, there may be a retrospective issue in the assessment, or that if this is widespread is accounted for in the assessment. So, you know, that's something we're going to continue to work on, but it was a really interesting, you know, discussion around that. So those were the big issues. I take comments if we have any.
Comments or questions for Jared?
All right, I'm not seeing any.
Well, I'll be happy that our OLE officers will be able to step on board a vessel with the pinched striper tail as opposed to the pinched or fan tail. Now they've got, or that's going to go to public hearing, I presume.
Yes, this winter.
Yeah, but I don't know if Lieutenant Bass is still on, but the feelings that I surmise from their discussion about that would they'd rather see one standard as opposed to 2.
Oh, absolutely. And it occurred to me, I think, at the meeting that people like to see a longer fish. So just by standard, people, you know, make it as long as they can. And to do anything other than that would probably take a huge educational outreach to teach people how to measure fish. But just keep it simple and measure it as big as you can.
Thank you, Lieutenant Bass. Questions or comments for Jared on the our subcommittee meeting, or what do we call it? Focus group?
Focus
meeting?
group.
Focus group meeting.
Bill Amaru?
Bill, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jared, only thing I have to say is I'm amazed that there's this great white shark fishery that's evolving on the backside beaches and anywhere else for that fact. When you can't legally possess a great white shark. They're an important, getting to be a more and more important part of the environmental balance on the backside of the Cape, if we could call it that. I think everybody understands why they're so important around Cape waters, and any threat, as we've had several come up on the beaches recently, dead, of large mature animals that threatens them needlessly is simply, to me, it should be out of the question. And I hope everything is done to prevent the impact that occurs when you hook into an animal like this from the beach.
Yeah.
Frankly, to me, I find it just disgusting. If anyone thinks that that's a sporting event, they're sadly mistaken in their judgment, and it should be prevented from occurring. Thank you.
I think what we want to do here is take the discretion or the gray area out of it. I mean, I think if you were to ask me if this activity is illegal, I would say yes. But there is that it continues to operate in this gray area. So if we could just, eliminate that, I think that would, make enforcement of it easier. The issue still remains, detecting it, because, there's a lot of coastline on the Outer Cape that isn't exactly, easily accessible.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I just think that we need to make a comment, and I'm making mine.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
the importance of this resource, and I'm very much in favor of doing what you can to see that they're protected.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'm not saying anything else on that. I think we have a couple presentations.
Okay, then we'll move it along. Status of Massachusetts river herring runs. I presume this will be Brad Chase.
Yep, Brad's on the call, and Brad, you should be able to share your screen now.
How you doing, folks? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, let me go forward then. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give an update on diatomaceous fish in Massachusetts for 2024. I'm going to focus on river herring. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to touch on some stocking that we do for both shad and river herring 2024, and then briefly summarize some of the results from the river herring stock assessment. And this will lead into the monitoring that we do on river herring spawning run counts. And then I'll finish up on diatomaceous fish restoration projects from this past year. So most of you know that we have this project that was established a long time ago, 1930s and 40s, by state laws, created our responsibility to manage these coastal fish runs. This included the creation of the DMF Fishway Crew in 1934, so we're entering our 90th year. And our focus for many decades was to build a lot of fishways for river herring. We had a crew up to 8 staff. Presently, we have 3 staff in the Fishway crew. We just gained a staff member this year. But our role has evolved. We do a fair amount of restoration that involves more than just river herring. And then we're very much involved with monitoring and interacting with within state and interstate management for these species. For stocking, we have a large stocking truck, and then we have a small truck that's capable of moving small amounts of fish, about 250 in the small blue tank, whereas we can move about 2,000 river herring in our big tank truck. And this past spring, we moved fish to these 5 locations, and these are all associated with restoration actions to improve passage, followed up by stocking to try to get these populations to rise. And then we're involved with a cooperative project to stock shad in the Taunton River. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is collecting shad at the Connecticut River, hatching them at the Attleboro Hatchery, and then we're stocking them in the Taunton River with the Division of Fish and Wildlife. It's been really successful so far. The goal was to get about 3 million shad out per year. In the first 3 years, they've exceeded this amount with over 5 million each year. And so we're pretty excited about the potential to really create a unique catch and release fishery for this larger diatomaceous fish in the Taunton River. DMF is monitoring each year, and we caught juvenile shad the first year that were fish that we stocked, and we haven't caught in the last 2 years. I will say we're going out just once a month for seining, and so it's pretty limited sampling, but we did catch the little juveniles the first year, and we will keep doing this type of monitoring and hopefully team up with the Division of Fish and Wildlife to use their electrofishing boat to see if we can document results from all this stocking activity. Here's our truck putting some fish in the river. Let me touch on the river herring stock assessment. I think you folks all know that DMF does a lot to interact with Atlantic Statesman Fisheries Commission. This involves stock assessments, and there's been recent stock assessments for these 3 species. We're very active. Ben Gehagen was on 2 of the river herring stock assessments. I've served on 2 of the American eel stock assessments. And so lots of activity at the TC level, the board level, peer reviews, stock assessment subcommittees. So all kinds of activity supporting these management plans. So no real surprises with this stock assessment. It had a pretty flat trend for most indices, and they concluded the stock was depleted relative to historic levels. So it doesn't really surprise anybody. The last update did find, there we go, a few significant trends, and that update went till 2017. This one continued to 2021. And so this time, for example, for alewife, there were 52 indices. None of these had significant negative trends, and only 4 had significant positive trends, and these are all up north in Maine. So not a lot of activity there. Overall, though, for a majority of the abundance indices for alewife and blueback, there was an over 50% probability of those indices being higher than the reference year of 2009. So not terribly exciting, but still positive, although not significant. And then unfortunately for mortality, it was the opposite story, whereas more than half the indices had a greater than 50% probability of being higher than the reference mortality point. So this was peer reviewed, and they came out with the assessment that it was based on the best available science. And again, the stock remains depleted, a flat trend since the reference year. There was a lot of attention this time on ocean mortality, both within the stock assessment and within the reviews for the board and the peer review. So I thought this was excellent to have this kind of discussion. And there was a pitch within the peer review for more sentinel population monitoring, where you have more than just one index of one life stage in a given river. And they're looking to accompany the spawning run counts with biological data. So this was good to hear. No surprise for us, but DMF has been endeavoring to have sentinel populations throughout the coast for at least 15 years. And so it was good to hear this approval of that process. I will briefly mention ocean bycatch because I think it was, again, really good to see this attention in the stock assessment and the peer review. And the message briefly is I think it's encouraging in recent years. The last 3 years have the lower annual total mortality from ocean bycatch of 91 metric tons, where it was quite a bit higher in the years before that. And this is thought to be due to lower effort in both the Atlantic herring and mackerel fisheries. So let me zero in on the run counts in Massachusetts to contribute to the stock assessment. They looked at 29 run counts in Massachusetts. They picked these 6 rivers here as sentinel populations where there's both spawning run counts and then biological data on length, age, and mortality estimates. And they also added 5 new counts this year, but in those cases, they're just spawning run counts. So either way, that's 11 run counts in Massachusetts were used in the stock assessment. So that is a credit to all the folks that are involved with the run counts. You can see those arrows are pretty much going sideways in most cases. So those are neutral trends from 2009 to 2021. There's a few going up and down, but they're not significant. But overall, there's not many that would be considered negative. Probably the only one would be that Nemasket River mortality arrow, which is going up. So not a lot of great news there, but also not a lot of negative news. So let me describe a little bit of detail. Whoops, sorry about that. I lost my screen, folks. You still have my screen?
Yeah.
You do. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm going to describe the counting stations that contribute to the stock assessment. Here's 7 Smith Root electronic counters that DMF manages on the coast. And these are 5 that are managed by partners, mostly the Coalition for Buzzards Bay and the Buzzards Bay region. And then DMF manages 3 video stations, as shown here. And then there are 6 additional video stations managed by partners. So a tremendous amount of effort beyond that volunteer visual counts, where there's at least 20 of those stations. Here's 21 stations that use a higher form of technology, either electronic or video. Some of these partner video stations are exploring AI processing of video, which I think is going to be really valuable in the coming years to try to streamline the process of getting through all these video counts. Here's the Sentinel stations where we collect biological data on river herring. And there's 2 additional ones where they're not video or electronic. There's the lift, the Merrimack River lift up here. And then the Nemasket River is the one volunteer visual count where we do collect biological data. So really good coverage on the coastline, I think, certainly relative to other states. Can we handle more? I'm not sure. you know, we send a lot of samples to our agent growth labs, so we keep them busy, and it's a lot of effort to manage some of these stations. So I do think we have good coverage, but the stock assessment was clear that it's these sentinel stations that really are needed to drive the stock assessment to a better, more robust state. Getting into some of the count data locally, here's a graph you've probably seen before that combines 4 sites that have over 20 years of data. And what I want to point out here is the harvest ban 2005. You can see some modest improvement since then. This decline before the harvest ban was thought to be driven by a drought. We had really significant droughts in 2016 and 20. And after 16, you can see that the fish came back at 3, 4, 5-year-olds without a lot of obvious influence from the drought of 2016, whereas we might be impacted by the drought of 2020 as we dip back after that nice high spot. But this progress here got people excited. There were definitely more fish showing up in the rivers after the harvest ban. So here's the Nemasket River. This has been known by many folks as the biggest run in the state until recently. You can see that decline after the drought. Here's the harvest ban and some nice improvements there, and then a big drop in 17. No real impact from that 2016 drought. And it allows them a 10% harvest of their time series mean, which is shown here. The plan also says if they're below the 25th percentile 3 years in a row, they cannot harvest. And that's where they are for this coming year. They've actually been below the 25th percentile. So per the plan, that there cannot be a harvest, even though the locals have decided not to have a harvest so far. They have permission. They've elected not to have a harvest. Here's the Mattapoisett River. And this one, I think, shows a really dramatic decline after that drought period into the harvest ban and some really modest numbers after that. And very concerning recent numbers here, just several thousand fish. And here's a site where there was really large harvest here 50 years ago, 60 years ago, very traditional harvest of river herring. And then things changed. And we've been just scratching our heads for years trying to assess what's going on with water quality at the spawning habitat. And it's starting to come into focus that it might not be that mysterious. This is how the river looks now. I was out there last week. This photo's from an early year, but it seems like every other year, this is how the river looks in the fall. There are several towns that use the water, the groundwater in the watershed for water supply. And it just seems like there just isn't enough water left for surface flows in this system. And I think the limit of outflow in the late summer and fall might be the biggest influence on this run in modern periods. So let me talk about some things that are going decently. Here's 2 of the top runs in Massachusetts in recent years. And both of these have had restoration activities where there was no passage to upstream habitat until 2012. Fishways went in Pembroke in blue and the Mystic River in green. And you can see some nice response right after that. So I add in the but these are the runs that have had the top count among all the sites that have counting. And so what you can see is this nice rise in response to restoration activity in Pembroke and Mystic. And Harwich had this big spike really recently after they started counting, but it had 3 years over 800,000 fish with 1 year peaking at over 1 million. A tremendous number of fish seen in this river during that period. And then what we can see in the last couple of years is here's a line at 500,000 fish. You can see these 3 runs are all flirting around that 500,000 fish mark. To me, that's a sign of a tremendous run of fish. There were fish in that case for weeks on end, really several months of fish running, and the public is very excited about that level of abundance in these rivers. So these 3 rivers, I think, are showing some good signs in recent years, and there's a lot of interest in these 3 locations for that reason. And so 2 of these 3 locations have requested harvest plans. And the Nemaska River, I mentioned earlier, they had their plan approved in 2016. They have not elected to have a harvest. Harwich had a plan approved in 2022, and they're looking very closely at having a harvest for the spring of 2025. And then this past year, we've had the town of Pembroke renewed their request for a sustainable fishery management plan. They had requested one before, and their run dipped down for a couple of years, so we pulled it off review because we just felt it wasn't prudent. And then they've had 2 years over 400,000 fish, and they are interested now in having us process a plan this winter. So that's what's going on for harvest plans. There's 2 approved, and there'll be 1 under review shortly. Okay, let me get into some restoration activities. You've heard me talk about the Fall River watershed in Braintree quite a bit recently. Here's how the watershed looked last year. And this is our diatomaceous fish restoration priority list in a GIS data layer. And it shows where fish can go in green, where they can't go is in red. And these yellow and red dots, green dots, they all have projects that could occur. Yellow means the fish can pass, but there's something holding them back. Red means they cannot pass. So focus in on the Armstrong Dam here. And then there's 2 yellow dots here just below it. Past year, 2 dams came out, the Armstrong Dam and the Ames Pond Dam. And a fishway was built to Rock Falls at this location here, giving river herring access to these upstream spawning areas for the first time in well over 200 years. It's over 200 acres of spawning and nursery habitat, so we're very excited about the potential of this project. It took a long time to happen. The first step was a fish ladder went in up at the reservoir in Braintree, and that was a case where DMF paid for the fishway pieces and the town of Braintree installed the fishway. Fish have had to wait a while until we started doing work at the Rock Falls downstream. Soon after that, and then here's the Armstrong Dam just before it came out. And then it was removed last summer. And then here's the fishway being constructed at Rock Falls, just finished this summer. So for the first time this coming April, May, we'll see fish moving through this site. So very exciting. A lot of stream maintenance is going on. Our crew and locals have worked a lot of activity to try to get fish access to places where no one's paid attention for ages. And so there's lots of locations where there's debris jams, tree falls, vegetation overgrowth. We've been doing a lot of work on the side trying to make sure they'll be able to get up next spring. I do want to highlight the fact that a lot is going on in the Boston Harbor region. We have this priority list. It's based in GIS, and it ranks the different projects by major coastal area. So for the North Shore in Boston, there's over 125 locations, and the top ranks are all projects in the Boston Harbor region. And so we know that Fall River project is done, that falls off the list, and so other projects move up. Very excited about the potential for some of these large scale projects to go forward in the upcoming years. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just touch on a couple projects that are going to construction this fall. There's so many projects in development right now that I just can't give them attention at this point. So I think I'll just talk about the ones that are happening, and then I'll finish up with some of the projects that DMF has done this past year. So South River in Marshfield, there's a dam that has a fishway that we've rehabbed a couple times, but it does impede American shad. And so this dam is coming out. The project is going to construction any day now, and it's going to remove the dam and then build a nature-like fishway that'll lead up to the elevation change. The town is interested in maintaining a veterans park that has a water wheel and a lagoon, so they still have to have a water control, and that will be in the form of a nature-like fishway where the dam was. And so it's a great project in sense of allowing passage for multiple species. Shad are present, lamprey, American eel, white perch, tomcod, sea run brook trout, rainbow smelt. A lot of species will use this site, so we're happy to be partners with this project. Stony Brook in Brewster, I think many of you have been here. It's really an iconic park to go see herring. DMF rebuilt the lower photograph there in 2011 with masonry weirs that still look really nice. And so there's a project underway now to rebuild the lower fishway weirs down below the street. These are very steep. It's kind of amazing that herring can navigate through these. They're not supposed to, given the elevation drops and the velocities that are present, but they do. But this project, it's led by the town of Brewster, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the Cape Cod Conservation District is going to bid right now, and they're hoping to start late this fall. DMF contributed last year. We spent $40,000 of money we recently received from a state house appropriation, and we paid for the notice of intent permit to process that. So we are contributing in that regard and as technical advisors. Seward Creek on Route 6A in Dennis. There are two culverts that were built. They were undersized and they had a very steep riprap embankment right next to the roadway. And they were constantly filling in with these stones that would tumble down and they'd get packed up with all this phragmite thatch. And so we found several fish kills, both spawning run adults and then juveniles trying to move downstream. They just couldn't get through. A lot of mortality there where otters would ambush the fish as they were trapped, and the otters would just oddly kill every fish that was present. And so there'd be big fish kills, both through impingement and otter mortality. So DMF started working with Mass DOT, who owns the highway, 15 years ago to try to convince them to replace these culverts. It took quite a while, but it's moving forward right now. It's contracted out to Robert Howe Company. Right now, you can't drive by there because the construction is underway, and they've got one of the culverts in. This was taken a couple of weeks ago, and so very happy to see this progressing. It should be a massive improvement to this Seward Creek herring run. Still need lots of work. The phragmites downstream will just always keep growing back and causing problems. So DMF drafted a stream maintenance plan that was approved by the Dennis Conservation Commission this summer that will help construction. And I wanted to talk about it briefly because we're having a public hearing tonight on the Westport River. There are two impassable dams. I think my internet was unstable for a second there, so I'll start over again. There are two impassable dams on the Westport River at Forge Pond Dam and Nokachoke, Lake Nokachoke. And there's 165 acres of spawning nursery habitat they could use in Lake Nokachoke as well as upstream habitat in the Shingle River. And so we got active looking at this site years ago. We teamed up with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do a survey of the pond, and they conducted or prepared a conceptual design for a fishway there. And we started working with the dam owner to develop a memorandum of understanding on how a fishway could be executed. And we're doing the same right now with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the upstream Lake Nokachoke Dam, also with the dam owner, the city of Fall River. So we're hoping to advance these two fishway projects. We've got this public hearing tonight. It's a public meeting actually at the Westport Green. And we're hoping to just garner public support to move this project forward. So hopefully we'll have some good attendance tonight and we'll get some feedback on how to get this thing funded. Let me wrap up with discussion on the DMF Fishway crew. We do a handful of jobs every year on our own. This year we did these 3 small jobs. All these jobs required a couple days of prep in consultation with local authorities, and then each of these were a half a day of field work. The Park River Snuff Mill Dam was badly degraded, lots of concrete degrading, as well as very large root balls obstructing some of the fishway notches. So we got in there, removed these root balls, and then just pointed up the concrete wherever we could, cut back some of the overgrowth, and that was a simple job, but it was just good to do it. Acushnet River, we found a dam used by a farm to backwater their irrigation pumps. Under low flows, this dam was blocking fish passage, so we worked with the dam owner for quite a while to get their approval. We had to do an analysis to show what we would do if we notched the dam, and they agreed to us coming in and notching the dam this summer to allow flow at all flow stages. And then up at Herring Creek on Aquina, we installed a video counter for them a few years ago. They added a new culvert downstream and wanted to shift the video counter to the culvert. So we fabricated a fish passage friendly video counting station, and we installed that this past March. So those are examples of just simple jobs that have a fair amount of prep, but they're done fairly quickly. Here's a slightly larger one done at the Cape Cod Canal, working with the Army Corps of Engineers at their fishway along the canal. They funded materials. They contributed a truck with a boom on it to lower our equipment down. We dewatered the site with pumps, and we worked together with the Army Corps crew to install this. It was a good project for us to kind of transfer some of our institutional knowledge to our younger crew. Here's Ed Clark teaching Mike Burgess some of the wonders of coming up with concrete forms as he had to scribe over a regular concrete floor. So good project for us to work with the Corps. We're going to go back next year and do 2 more of these weirs. And here's a look at the one that was finished this year, this past September. Depot Pond in Eastham. Here's a case where herring come to Great Pond. They can pass into the small Priscilla Pond, but then at the bike path, there was a culvert. Really should be a red circle there, because they just couldn't pass through the culvert that was obstructed by a very large root ball, as a tree grew right next to the culvert over the years. So we got permission from the Conservation Commission to go in, and we pulled out the root ball. It took a come along. We tried to get it by hand. It just wouldn't budge. It was over 300 pounds of a root ball that had been growing there for years inside the culvert. We dug that out. We dug out the lower channel to allow fish passage. Then we installed stop log slots on the upstream side so the town could manage the water levels with stop log boards. And so we're hoping next year fish can access the 29-acre depot pond in this watershed. Here's our last project we just completed last week. Herring Brook or Wings Pond in Falmouth. This is a site where the DMF Fishway crew built this fishway in 1975, working with the Cranberry Bog owner. And over the years, these 10 concrete weirs became, the flow just started to flow around most of them. A lot of erosion occurring, as well as sea level coming up higher and going around these weirs. So this was a notice of intent. So the project prep was really large. It took a lot to get this. We paid for the notice of intent. It cost $34,000 to do it. Our materials on the site to work here for 2 weeks cost about $4,500. So an example of how we can move efficiently, but also of some of the higher cost of permit and design work for these fishways. We work with the town of Falmouth. They donated 2 staff to help us, and we worked on 7 weirs. We removed 3 of the weirs, rebuilt 1 with a concrete form, and a few others we reset the banks with fiber rolls. Great project for us to get out there with our excavator, our truck, our cement mixer, and just teach some of the younger staff some of the things we know about working on fishways. Here we are putting in fiber rolls next to a weir that we're removing. We tried taking out the weirs with our excavator, but they did not budge. They had such large concrete footings. And so unfortunately, we had to move to demo, and that meant working with a demo hammer. Things were going slowly, so we bought a second generator, and we got the old guys working on the demo hammers. And then we got out our concrete saw, and we were eventually able to take out 3 of these weirs and replace them with just natural stone weirs in their place. And we did this while the Cranberry Bog right next door to was being harvested. So it was kind of interesting to see that happen. We had to work in a way that would not interact with juvenile herring that might want to come downstream or interact with the Cranberry Bog harvesting. So really interesting cooperative project, just finished. I don't even have after photographs yet, but it's a nice site where we removed 3 weirs and established some natural rock weirs in their place. And so that's all I have. Be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Questions or comments for Brad?
Khalil.
Khalil, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I want to say is I want to commend Brad for this incredible piece of work that he's doing, and the presentation, the boots on the ground folks that you have out there with you. It's an incredible project. It's a very important project. Connectivity from ocean to natal waters where they're breeding is so important for diadromous fish. And I just want to commend you for all your hard work. And it was a very, very nice presentation.
Thank you, Khalil. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Khalil.
Bill Amaru?
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brad, fantastic. You know, this, to me, this is the best of the best, because this is where the citizens of the Commonwealth can really see the kind of work that the Division of Marine Fisheries performs for the citizenry of this Commonwealth. It makes me feel really good to know that these kinds of results are part of what we aim for as managers of fisheries. And of course, I got to mention that the Sissuit project, the whole neighborhood, the whole area around Dennis on both sides are so excited about the possibility of having that run reestablished in good numbers, and the work is ongoing. And Robert Our company, we drive around it every day on our way over to Sissuit Harbor where the boat is. But it's great to know that this project is going to come to fruition soon, and that the lake will be full of herring again, as it once was. Anyway, with all the other work and the things that are happening in Orleans, you know, of course, our Meeting House Pond run will be rebuilt, and the town was gracious enough to help us with the financing that the federal government allowed us. So we're going to be looking at that up the road. I hope you're involved in that when time comes for construction and all the rest. So thanks again. Terrific job.
Thank you, Bill.
Jared?
Director McKiernan?
Yeah, hopefully my audio is, hopefully my audio is functioning. I do want to mention that under former Commissioner Amadon, one of his priorities was to expand this program, and he did us a $180,000 budget increase specifically for anadromous fish. And I think what you're seeing here is the product of that. You know, Brad getting funds to pay for engineering and also some extra skilled staff. I also want to mention that Commissioner O'Shea's biodiversity strategic plan that he's working on is going to highlight from the DMF side of the shop eelgrass protection, eelgrass restoration. But this is probably going to be one of the highlights, is seeking more work, or doing more work and seeking more support for just this kind of work that Brad is showing you here. So both commissioners have seen the real value in this, and they've worked hard to get Brad the tools and the resources that he needs.
Thanks, Dan. If I could briefly follow up, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that money that Dan just mentioned directly funded 5 projects this past year, including the Stony Brook contribution, the Westport contribution, and paid for the Wings Pond project in Falmouth. So very much appreciated to get that bonus of cash this year to do these projects.
Comments, questions for Brad?
Well, let's say anything else, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Brad. It was a great
All right,
presentation, and you should do it more often with us. Except for that top left photo there, that huge striped bass that you're holding in your lap out of the water. You know, we are trying to protect striped bass.
Ray, I did release that fish, put a tag in it, and release that 47-inch fish.
Yeah, Ed. So
Promise.
you tagged it. Has it been caught again, or did it die?
I'm pretty sure it was a very safe catch and release process. So I'm sure it's out there still.
I hope so. Good seeing you, Brad.
Same here, Ray. Thank you.
You really have to stop by the office and have coffee sometime.
Let's have a coffee.
Talk about Harwich. Okay, I guess we can move along then if nobody's got comments or questions for Brad. I believe we're going to have Anna from, thank God, the Gloucester office, I hope, where their web service is much better than the office in New Bedford. Anna, are you presenting?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Hopefully my internet stays strong. Give me 1 second. Okay, do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right, you're going to hear from me about something different today than normal. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, commissioners. I'm not giving you a quota species update today. I kind of gave my last one last month, and we'll circle back to that in the new year. But in the meantime, we're approaching our permit renewal season, and we have some exciting news for this year. We are going to be offering online permit renewals or permit applications for the first time starting in about a month. So let's get into it. Just a little bit of background, and I will be brief today, but there's a little bit of background on this. We started this project back in 2019, had a pause in 2020 and 21 for a variety of reasons, but resumed in 2022 and ultimately released an internal system in January of 2023. At that time, people may have noticed their permits looked a little different, and that was due to this change in system. The original system was about over 20 years old at the time of replacement. It was a much needed upgrade and modernization. And in the process, we knew we were going to release this to external users to do the renewals themselves online, but we needed some time to get the permitting staff up to speed on the application itself before heading down that road. So we now have 2 renewal seasons for all of our permitting staff using this system. They are very comfortable using it for renewals and new applications, etc. So we initiated kind of version 2 in 2023 and have released several iterations of that, and we are prepared to go live in December with the online renewals. This project has involved extensive work by a number of DMF staff. Myself, Story, and Kevin put in quite a bit of time over 2019 through 2023. And then all of our permitting staff and my statistics staff put in countless hours testing various iterations of all the things that this system can do. So this external release to all of our permit holders is approximated around December 15th, basically when our renewals will hit the streets. We intend to mail them on our usual timeline, roughly about a week or so after Thanksgiving. We expect them to hit mailboxes around December 15th, and in that envelope will be a notice that announces this program. So what have we been working on? We've been continuing to fix bugs in the system. We've been adding certain enhancements to ensure the quality of the data that comes through and limited problems for the permit holders, and preparing our staff to support any users who try to do this. It will accept credit cards. There are service fees that apply, similar to most online transactions that you conduct. You can see here the credit card, debit card, and ACH fees are listed here. ACH is the electronic transfer of funds, basically just an e-check. So how are we going to launch this? We're going to have this insert in the renewals, like I mentioned, and we will launch a website at that time too. And then after the holidays, we will issue an advisory on this, as well as potentially an email campaign at that point. So how are we going to support our users? As I mentioned, we're going to have a website dedicated to this system. I have several how-to documents available on different aspects of the system. All of that will be launched in December and linked from our existing permit application sites. The guides that I've created, they're currently only in English, but we do intend to translate them as well as make them accessible. And then we will have a phone help desk that's available during business hours. It is staffed by our permitting staff. So it is not available on holidays and weekends, but that's where the website comes in to give you resources during those hours. There will be no dedicated in-person office support during business operating hours. Our permitting staff have to be available for the phone help desk as well as for any people who continue to renew on paper. So anyone who's walking in with renewals, as well as processing the mail. So we can't have them do that and offer this in-person support. However, I may be traveling to both offices to provide in-person support at specific times each week if that is ends up being a demand for support. So what should you expect? My goal is to have 25 to 40% of the permits in year one done online. This number comes from roughly the number of people who report electronically, including dealers and fishermen. It's slightly less than that number, and I think that's an acceptable range given some people will have different issues as they try to use the system, and that may or may not result in more or less people using it. Depending on the initial response, whether it's high or low. If it's low, I'll probably initiate an email campaign in early winter, early January, to encourage people to try it and see how it goes. Once an account has been claimed on the system, I do expect a relatively smooth experience for permit holders. The account claiming process is the most difficult and the most cumbersome process, but we want to emphasize that that process is to ensure you're getting access to the right permits and no one else is getting access to your permits. So we're trying to make sure that everyone who signs up for an account is tied to the right accounts, etc., and that we don't make any mistakes in that process. So as with that said, that is going to take a little extra time. So our workload is going to be pretty high in the beginning, which may result in some delays in responses. A lot of people assume if you're doing it online, it's going to be immediate. And that will be true, but probably not this year. Ensuring their access to the permits is correct is just going to take some extra time. It's very high attention to detail. But like I said, as soon as we get through this year and we have 40% of our permit holders already on board, next year will be probably less percentage. So this type of effort is expected to ease as we go forward. But we also need to have staff available to do those other tasks like I mentioned in the previous slide. So in general, we do expect that same normal 10 business day turnaround for online requests that we have for paper requests, particularly during this transition year. Few things just to emphasize as we launch the system. One is that credit cards will not be accepted in the offices. They can only be used in the online system. That is going to be plastered all over our front offices as we start this season. But that is a very important, we want to emphasize that to all our permit holders. In order to renew any permit online, all of your permits must be in compliance with any reporting requirements for the current and previous 2 years. This is an automatic block if you are out of compliance. In the online system, all affidavits are digital, and so all signatures are digital. Then all renewal deadlines still apply. So that February 28th deadline is still in effect, and after February 28th, you will not be able to renew that permit online. However, any appeals, per usual, we do get appeals on that deadline. All of that must be done on the paper application. And then just a few tech tips. I do recommend using a computer over a tablet over a phone for the online renewals. The application is a website-based application. It's not ideal for the size of a phone. You can do it, but it's just a little trickier to move things around and get all the fields checked off accordingly. And then lastly, we just ask for some patience during this launch. It is going to be a bumpy transition as we, especially given that we mail renewals right around the holidays. But we will get back to permit holders who have questions, and we are available during business hours to answer them. So I'm going to give a very brief demo to show what it might look like to renew a shellfish and seaworms permit. So give me a second. This is our test environment. So all of these data are fake data, but it looks very similar to our production environment that everyone would be given the link to. So you would click on login. I have my account saved, but here's where you would also create an account if you hadn't logged in before. This one screen takes a little extra time, so give it a second. There we go. Within your landing screen, you have a dashboard which will load all your permits. You have some other links up here. You have a link to your profile. There's an apply for new permit button. Unfortunately, they might be pushing out a new version of this test environment right now, which might screw me up a little bit. But you have your list of permits. It's usually ordered in order of date and then permit number, expiration date and then permit number. These are all, like I said, fake data. So I'm just going to show you the shellfish and seaworms, since that's a pretty simple one. You would click on Manage, Renew. It gives you a summary. And then these are the different sections of the commercial permit application that exist right now. This is a renewal, so I don't need to really update anything unless I'm changing something. But as a shellfish and seaworms permit, I don't have a vessel. I'm electronic reporting. I have the shellfish endorsement. No changes. When I click next, this is the shellfish affidavit. In order to sign it, you have to check that box. Click sign. Go to next. You sign your other affidavits. Certain permit types do require documents to be submitted in order to be approved. Shellfish and seaworms has none. This is a review page. You can see what you added. Then you check your payment method and you process your payment. Brings you to a payment screen. Don't worry, I am entering a fake credit card here. This is just for testing purposes. You do have to fill out things here. You can see the service fees, and of course I lost my mouse. Do you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's weird. All right. I lost my mouse, so I'm just gonna use my other mouse. Hold on. You hit submit payment. Does some things, and then you submit your application. Now, at this point, it's going to either issue the permit, or in this case, it submits it to DMF for our review. While I'm talking, Story is going to approve this, but this receipt page gives you some information. You can print a receipt from here. It automatically will download it, as well as show you the receipt. This is similar to the receipts that you get right now when you pay by check or credit card or cash. You can also print your affidavits from here if you would like. This generates all the things that you signed during your renewal. And then you just click print and it comes up with a printable screen. If I go to the dashboard, we'll see if it's done. Story did, he approved it already. So you'll actually see that my my notification says it has, actually, I probably need to refresh that page. Hold on. Yeah, there's 2 notifications. So this second one is that my renewal application approved. At that point, the user would get an email that says the same information. Now that I know it's approved, I just come in and I click on the permit number, and it generates my permit that I can then print or store to my electronic device, and go from there. And that's it.
Questions for Anna? Comments?
Not seeing anything, Mr. Chair.
Well, Anna, congratulations. You're bringing DMF into the 21st century.
Thank you. This has been a lot of work, and we're really excited for this to be successful.
Yes, well, I'm sure with you pushing the buttons and being in charge of this project, I'm sure it will be.
Thanks, Ray.
Any other thoughts or comments from commission members? Not hearing anybody, we're going to move on to other business. Thank you very much, Anna. Commission member comments. Chris, we'll start with you. Chris McGuire.
Yeah, I don't really have any comments. It's a good meeting. I agree with you that it'd be nice to try for November in person next year because it is a beautiful day down here on Cape Cod. So thanks for the good reports by all the DMF staff.
Thank you, Chris. Khalil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm all set.
Thank you. Tim Brady.
No comment. Good meeting. Good presentations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tim. Bill Doyle.
Great presentations, so informative. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Shelley Edmondson.
Thanks, Ray. Just thanks for the great meeting.
And Bill Amaru.
I think Bill had to leave, Ray. I've got a note here in the chat.
Okay. Then I'm going to open this up to the public. Anybody in the public, have they got their hands raised, Jared?
Beth Casoni, how you doing?
Good afternoon,
you're
Jared.
recognized.
Good afternoon, Ray. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Thank you for recognizing me. It was a great meeting, lots of information. I have a question and more of a comment for Bob Glenn. Bob, great presentation on the right whale update. I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments at our annual weekend about the release of the new EIS and what impact that may have on all the risk reduction that Massachusetts has. And I made a little note. Is there any chance we might get a credit or a refund on some of the risk reduction that we have in place? I'm being optimistic, and I know that there's going to be some fishermen that are going to be asking that. So I just wanted to kind of flag that for the roundtable discussion. And then also on the on-demand gear grant program, I did have a call this morning, and I thought it was quite interesting that somebody from California was interested in the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries grant program, but he was an on-demand gear developer. And will the state be acquiring the necessary EFP, or will that be on individual fishermen to acquire? No need to respond. That's just food for thought. So we can talk later on. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Beth. Anyone else from the public, Jared?
Not seeing anyone else, Mr. Chair. We have Safathia.
Safathia, you're recognized.
Well, finally, it's just crazy. I wanted to say, first of all, Beth, great questions, great concerns, absolutely. And wow, everyone, I couldn't be prouder of the presentations of both. I mean, as far as what we're doing to be on top of things, especially electronically, and the presentation of what's happening, it was great. What a great job. Great job, everyone. You know what? Happy Thanksgiving, because you just made mine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Stefacia. I'll close it out. Once
Ray?
again,
Can I just make one comment? This is Dan.
yes, by all means, you're
So
the big dog. So make
thank
it
you. So to Chris McGuire's comment and others about the in-person, potential, you can blame me for this being virtual because we were really doing it based on previous years' sort of COVID trends. Like we didn't want to have a meeting so close to a holiday of Thanksgiving and have people, get together and get sick. But honestly, the COVID counts as measured in the MWRA, if that's my favorite place to track them, are super low. So in hindsight, we might have been well suited for a meeting this fall. But that's my strategy. I mean, I don't consider this the winter season just yet, but it was really sort of a COVID situation and trying to be precautionary about people's health.
Thank you, Dan. I would just like to thank all the commission members for their attendance, the great questions, and also thank DMF staff. As always, they present so well on all the different issues, and it seems, Dan, your staff has many issues, many silos. And I'm very appreciative for your staff and the commission we have. And I'd like to wish everybody a happy holiday Thanksgiving season. And I guess we'll meet again December 17th via Zoom. On that, I need a motion to adjourn.
Hi, Ray, it's Chris. I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Chris. Second by.
I'll second it, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. And there's no opposition to this motion. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holiday.